The wormhole split reality like a blade through flesh. It wasn't the orderly shimmer of a stable Einstein-Rosen bridge or the controlled precision of Peacekeeper starburst technology. This was something violent, something wrong, a gash torn through the fabric of space-time itself, bleeding exotic radiation and impossibility into the uncharted territories. The phenomenon registered across every sensor within 3 solar systems, a scream of wounded physics that made navigation computers crash and gave sentient ships nightmares. Aboard the living Leviathan Moya, the breach triggered immediate panic. "Frail me," Erin's son breathed, her peacekeeper training warring with the sheer wrongness of what her console displayed. "Pilot, tell me you're seeing this." From his symbiotic chamber deep within Moya's biomechanical heart, Pilot's multi-layered voice crackled through the comm. "I am, Officer Son. Moya is disturbed. She's never encountered spatial distortion of this magnitude. The energy signature is unlike anything in her ancestral memory." John Crichton floated up through the center chamber's access shaft, his black t-shirt and leather pants a stark contrast to the organic amber lighting of Moya's interior. The human astronaut's face wore the expression he'd perfected over cycles in the uncharted territories, equal parts curiosity and dread. "Please tell me that's not another wormhole. I've had enough of the space-time continuum trying to kill me this week." "It's not one of your wormholes," Ka Dargo rumbled, the Luxon warrior's crest of tendrils quivering with agitation as he studied the tactical display. "The configuration is entirely different. This appears to be a tier. Something forced its way through." Jean emerged from her meditation chamber, the blue-skinned Delvian's plant-like features serene despite the crisis. "I sense great turmoil," she said softly, her empathic abilities reading the psychic resonance of the breach. "Not malice, but purpose, desperation perhaps, and something else, something vast and ancient." Rigel 16th, the deposed Dominar, hovering on his throne sled, clutched his precious belongings tighter. "Vast and ancient usually means vast and powerful, which usually means extremely bad for us. I vote we run. Pilot, engage Starburst on my authority as—" "Your authority extends to precisely nothing, you flatulent toad," Erin snapped. "But for once, the slug makes sense. We should—" The object emerged from the rift before anyone could finish the thought. It was a ship, but calling it merely a ship was like calling a cathedral merely a building. The vessel stretched nearly 2 microns in length, its hull composed of gleaming golden alloy that seemed to shimmer with internal light. The architecture defied conventional design. Sweeping curves and angular planes merged into something both organic and crystalline, adorned with structures that might have been weapons or temples or both. Energy fields crackled across its surface in geometric patterns, and at its heart, a massive crystal structure pulsed with power that made Moya's sensors recoil. "Holy crap," Crichton whispered, his scientist's mind struggling to process the technological achievement before him. That thing makes Peacekeeper command carriers look like rowboats." The golden vessel hung in space for a moment, and then it began broadcasting. Not through conventional communications arrays. This was different. The transmission bypassed Moya's receivers entirely and manifested directly in the minds of every sentient being aboard. It wasn't words, not exactly, but pure meaning crystallized into consciousness. Images flooded their awareness. Vast fleets of similar ships, a race of beings composed of energy and light, bound into physical form. Terrible wars against darkness incarnate. A philosophy of purity and balance that had endured for millennia. And a single, unmistakable message. Entaro Adun. We are the Protoss. We seek understanding of this realm. Jean gasped, her empathic sensitivity overwhelmed by the psychic contact. So Dargo steadied her, his face a mask of warrior's composure despite the violation of having alien thoughts injected into his mind. Rigel's eyes bulged with terror. Erin's hand moved instinctively to her pulse pistol, even though she knew the weapon would be useless against such a vessel. Crichton, however, smiled, though it was the slightly manic grin he wore when the universe had just gotten exponentially more complicated. "Well," he said, his voice carrying the sardonic humor that had kept him sane through impossible situations. "I guess we're not in Kansas anymore, again." The human moved to Moya's central command, his fingers already working the biomechanical interface with practiced ease. Pilot, can we respond without them turning us into cosmic dust? Moya wishes to communicate, Pilot replied, his voice tinged with the ship's own curiosity. She senses kinship, perhaps. The vessel is not entirely technological. There's a living component, similar to Leviathans but fundamentally different. She believes they may not be hostile. Not hostile and actually not hostile are two very different things, Erin observed, her Peacekeeper tactical training cataloging threat vectors. That ship could vaporize us before we could even attempt starburst. Which is why we don't run, Crichton countered. These Protoss, and yeah, I'm getting some serious Stargate vibes here. They're asking questions, not shooting. That's a good sign in my book. Dargo's hand rested on the pommel of his Qualta blade. Or they're assessing whether we're worth the expenditure of ammunition. Only one way to find out. Crichton took a breath. I'm hoping this wasn't about to become another entry in his long list of catastrophically bad decisions. Pilot, open a channel. Let's see if we can talk to the glowing space gods without starting an interstellar incident. The transmission array activated, carrying Crichton's voice and the combined presence of Moya's crew toward the golden carrier hanging in the void like a fragment of heaven lost among the stars. Neither the Protoss nor Moya's crew yet understood that this meeting would challenge everything they believed about honor, survival, and what it meant to be righteous in a universe that cared nothing for righteousness. The uncharted territories were about to become even more uncharted, since the response came not through spoken words but through crystallized thought made manifest in consciousness, a phenomenon that left Crichton's human brain feeling like someone had poured liquid mathematics directly into his skull. I am Executor Celendis. We speak for the Protoss Templar fleet and the hierarchy that guides us. Your vessel possesses awareness, consciousness. This is unexpected in these coordinates. Pilot's voice emerged tremulous but steady. Moya is a Leviathan, a biomechanoid ship. She is as alive as any of us aboard her. As are you, addressing beings of many species who have found companionship and shared exile. A pause. The golden carrier shifted, its energy fields reconfiguring in patterns that Moya's sensors interpreted as something between curiosity and assessment. When the Protoss response came, it carried undertones of something that might have been surprise. Exile, an interesting commonality. We too are displaced, torn from our continuum by forces we sought to understand. The rift was not of our making, though we attempted to study its properties. Now we find ourselves in unfamiliar space. Your physics operate under subtly different principles. We must adapt. Join the club, Crichton muttered. Then, louder, Executor Celendis, I'm John Crichton, human, astronaut, and professional dimension hopper. These are the crew of Moya. We know something about being lost far from home. If you're looking for help navigating the uncharted territories, we might be able to. We require no assistance. The response came sharp as a blade. The Protoss are the eldest of races. We have transcended flesh to achieve union of mind and purpose. We are shepherds of balance, warriors against the darkness that would consume all life. We do not require aid from. Another pause, longer this time. Crichton could almost feel the psychic equivalent of someone swallowing their pride. However, intelligence about local spatial dynamics and dominant political structures would be strategically valuable. We propose an exchange of information. Mutual understanding serves the greater balance. Erin's eyes narrowed. That's peacekeeper talk wrapped in religious packaging. They need us, but don't want to admit it. So they're arrogant space gods with a superiority complex, Crichton whispered back. Fantastic, my favorite kind. Jeanne moved forward, her movements graceful despite the tension crackling through the command chamber. Executor Celendis, I am Pa'u Zoto Jeanne, Anya Delvian priest of the 10th level. Your psionic transmission suggests you possess abilities similar to my own people. Perhaps I might serve as an intermediary for more nuanced communication? The golden carrier pulsed, and suddenly the psychic contact intensified. Jeanne gasped as her consciousness touched something vast and multifaceted. Not a single mind, but hundreds, thousands, all linked in a network of purpose and discipline that made her own people's unity pale in comparison. She perceived warrior monks whose thoughts moved in lockstep formations, zealots whose faith burned with the intensity of stars, and underlying it all, a philosophy of purity that was both beautiful and terrifying in its absolutism. Then she felt Selendis herself, a female consciousness shaped by centuries of war, loss, and unwavering conviction. The executor's thoughts carried the weight of countless battles against enemies whose very existence corrupted reality. Jean saw flashes, a swarm of ravenous insectoid creatures, twisted beings of flesh and mutation, and something darker, something that lurked in the spaces between thought itself. You perceive clearly, priest, Selendis acknowledged. Your mind is surprisingly structured for one so distant from the Kala. The Kala is our link, the psychic network that binds all Protoss in unity of purpose. Through it, we are never alone, never uncertain. Every Protoss contributes to the whole, and the whole sustains each individual. Jean withdrew slightly from the contact, her face pale. Such complete unity, she breathed. It is magnificent, but also, there is little room for individual interpretation. Is there? Dargo stepped forward, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber. I am Ka Dargo, son of a Luxan general who valued honor above all things. Your transmission speaks of warriors and purpose. I would understand your concept of honor, Executor. The carrier's energy fields shifted again, and when Selendis responded, there was something like approval in the psychic resonance. Honor is adherence to purpose. We are the firstborn, created by the Zelnaga to achieve perfection of form and psionic strength. Though our creators are lost, we carry forward their vision. We fight to preserve life against the forces of chaos, the Zerg swarm that consumes all, the Terran factions that war among themselves. We seek balance through strength, purity through discipline. Purity, Erin repeated, her voice flat. I've heard that before. While the peacekeepers preach purity of purpose, too. It usually involves killing anyone who disagrees with them. We are not conquerors, Selendis replied, and there was an edge to the psychic contact now. We are protectors. When lesser species threaten the balance, we intervene. When corruption spreads, we cleanse. This is not tyranny. It is responsibility. Rigel couldn't contain himself any longer. Oh, wonderful! Not only are they powerful and arrogant, they also have a divine mandate to interfere in everyone else's business. I've overthrown governments with better justifications. Crichton held up a hand before the situation could deteriorate further. Okay, let's pump the brakes on the philosophical cage match. Executor, you want information about this region. We can provide that. But you need to understand something. The uncharted territories don't operate on concepts like balance and purity. Out here, it's chaos, survival. The peacekeepers control most of the colonized systems, and they make your worst enemies sound like kindergarten bullies. There are criminal organizations, slave traders, corporate interests, and about 1,000 different species all trying to avoid being conquered, exploited, or eaten. He paused, letting that sink in. There are no shepherds here, no cosmic guardians, just people trying to get by in a universe that doesn't care whether they live or die. And the ones who claim to be protecting everyone? Usually they're the most dangerous. Silence. The psychic contact hummed with processing, thousands of Protoss' minds analyzing this information through the lens of their collective experience. Finally, your description suggests a galaxy in dire need of order. Without structure, without purpose, sentient beings descend into barbarism. This cannot stand. And there it is, Erin said softly. They're going to try to fix things. Jean raised a calming hand. Executor Selendis, might we propose a more gradual exchange? You have knowledge of technologies and psionic disciplines we cannot imagine. We have experience navigating the political realities of this region. Perhaps representatives from your vessel could transfer to Moya for direct interaction? Face-to-face contact often reveals truths that psychic transmission cannot. Another pause. Then, we do not lower ourselves to enter inferior vessels. However, the proposal has merit. We will permit a delegation of 3 from your crew to board the carrier Avenger. You will experience Protoss civilization directly. This will facilitate understanding. Dargo's tendrils flared. A summons, not an invitation. How gracious. It is an honor, Selendis corrected. Few outside our race have walked the sacred halls of a Protoss carrier. We extend this opportunity in the spirit of cooperation. Crichton looked at his crewmates. Erin's hand remained near her weapon, suspicious and calculating. Jean appeared both fascinated and concerned. Dargo's warrior pride warred with tactical caution. Rigel had already floated toward the back of the chamber. I'll go, Crichton said. Someone needs to play ambassador, and I've got experience dealing with advanced races who think they're better than everyone else. I will accompany you, Jean added. If their psionic network is as profound as I sensed, they may need someone who can truly understand their perspective. Dargo growled low in his throat. And you'll need someone watching your backs when their philosophy of purity starts looking like an excuse for conquest. I'm coming. Erin nodded curtly. I'll maintain position on Moya with pilot. If this goes wrong, we'll need an exit strategy. Crichton smiled without humor. When has anything ever gone wrong when we meet new aliens? He activated the comm. Executor, we accept. 3 of us will transfer to your vessel. But fair warning, if this is a trap, we're really good at creative escape plans. There will be no trap, human. The Protoss do not deceive. We are warriors of light, not creatures of shadow. Prepare for transport. Entaro Adun. The psychic contact withdrew. You're leaving behind a silence that felt oppressive after such intimate mental connection. Crichton, Jean, and Dargo moved toward the transport pod bay, each lost in their own thoughts about what they were about to encounter. None of them noticed the secondary sensor reading that pilot quietly archived, a distant signature matching Peacekeeper reconnaissance drones, observing from the edge of the system. Scorpius had already learned of the golden ships, and Scorpius was very, very interested. The transport beam was unlike anything in Crichton's considerable experience with alien technology. It didn't tingle like Peacekeeper matter transmission or wrench the gut like wormhole travel. Instead, it felt like being gently dissolved into pure thought and then reconstituted on the other side, a sensation both profound and deeply unsettling. When material reality reassembled around them, Crichton found himself standing in a cathedral of light and crystal. The interior of the Protoss carrier defied conventional ship architecture. Walls weren't metal bulkheads, but flowing structures of some golden alloy interwoven with crystalline lattices that pulsed with inner luminescence. The ceiling soared impossibly high, supported by pillars carved with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. Everything hummed with barely contained energy, and the air itself felt charged with psionic potential. By the goddess, Jean whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. The entire vessel is a psychic amplifier. I can feel the minds aboard. So many, all connected, all moving in perfect harmony. Dargo's hand rested on his Qualta blade, or his warrior instincts on high alert despite the grandeur. Perfect harmony makes me nervous. Soldiers who think in lockstep don't question orders. Crichton was about to respond when the Protoss appeared. They materialized from shimmering energy fields, 3 figures, each towering over even Dargo's considerable height. Their bodies were humanoid in basic structure, but radically different in detail. Instead of mouths, they possessed a nest of writhing nerve cords where a jaw should be, giving them an appearance both alien and oddly noble. Their eyes glowed with golden light, and their skin, what little showed beneath ornate armor, seemed to shimmer with faint bioluminescence. The central figure wore armor of gleaming white and gold, adorned with crystalline structures that pulsed in rhythm with her thoughts. Her nerve cords moved with deliberate grace as she regarded the visitors with an intensity that made Crichton feel like a specimen under examination. I am Executor Selendis. The psychic voice resonated directly in their minds, perfectly synchronized with the subtle movements of her nerve cords. Welcome aboard the Avenger. You stand in the Hall of Contemplation, where Templar meditate upon their connection to the Kala before battle. To her right stood a figure in darker armor, deep blue and silver, carrying what appeared to be wrist-mounted psionic blades that crackled with barely contained energy. I am Zealot Mohander. I ensure the security of this vessel and all who serve aboard it. The third Protoss wore robes instead of heavy armor, their garments decorated with symbols that hurt to look at directly. I am Judicator Nahan, and I interpret the will of the Conclave and ensure our actions align with the wisdom of the Kala. Jean stepped forward first, bowing with the grace of her priestly training. We are honored, Executor. Your vessel is magnificent, a testament to the union of technology and consciousness. You perceive truly, Celendis acknowledged. Every component of this carrier is integrated with our psionic network. The ship is not merely a tool, but an extension of our collective will. When we command it to move, it moves. When we require weapons, they manifest our intent made destructive. Crichton raised an eyebrow. So you're telling me this entire ship runs on psychic power? No conventional propulsion? No separate weapon systems? We possess both, Judicator Nahan corrected, the psychic voice carrying a note of what might have been condescension. But technology achieves its highest form when merged with psionic discipline. Lesser races rely solely on mechanical systems because they lack the mental unity to achieve true integration. Lesser races, Dargo repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Interesting choice of words. Celendis's glowing eyes focused on the Luxan. Observation, not judgment. The Protoss have existed for millennia, achieving mastery of mind and matter that younger species have yet to approach. This is fact, not arrogance. The Terrans we knew were fractious, short-lived, consumed by internal conflict. The Zerg were mindless devourers. We assumed a role of guardianship because none other could. Crichton felt the familiar irritation that came from dealing with self-appointed cosmic police. Yeah, we've met your type before. Unusually right before they try to uplift everyone, whether we want it or not. The Zealot Mohandar's psionic blades flared slightly. You speak with disrespect, human. The Executor extends courtesy by allowing you aboard this sacred vessel. Mohandar, Celendis's mental voice carried a note of reproof. They are strangers to our ways. Ignorance is not the same as insult. To the visitors, your human speaks from experience with oppressors. I sense this through your surface thoughts, the peacekeepers you mentioned. A militaristic hegemony that conquers through force and maintains control through fear. Got it in one, Crichton confirmed. They're the dominant power in this region. Millions of systems, billions of subjects, all kept in line by fleets that make your carrier look small. And they don't take kindly to anyone challenging their authority. Then they are corrupt, Judicator Nahan stated flatly. True authority derives from righteousness and the wisdom of collective purpose, not mere military strength. Such an organization must be opposed. Aaron's voice crackled through the small communicator Crichton had concealed in his jacket. John, tell me the glowing space zealots aren't planning to start a war with the peacekeepers. He sub-vocalized his response, knowing Moya's enhanced comm systems would pick it up. That's exactly what they're thinking, Aaron. Stand by. Jean intervened smoothly, her diplomatic skills honed by years of political maneuvering on her homeworld. Executor, perhaps we should explain the complexities before discussing opposition. The peacekeepers maintain order across vast territories. While they are brutal, yes, and their methods often unconscionable. But they also prevent many smaller conflicts, provide infrastructure, and justify tyranny with efficiency? Celendis's psychic voice carried genuine confusion. This is moral compromise. In our war against the Zerg, we faced similar choices. Allow infested worlds to exist as buffer zones, or cleanse them completely to prevent corruption's spread. We chose purity over pragmatism. Always. Dargo leaned forward, his warrior's pride fully engaged now. And how many innocents died in your cleansings, Executor? How many beings who might have been saved were instead sacrificed to your concept of purity? Silence. The three Protoss exchanged glances, not vocally, but through the subtle shifting of their nerve cords and the flickering of their glowing eyes. Yet Crichton realized they were communicating through their Kala, having an entire conversation in the microseconds of human perception. When Celendis responded, there was something different in her psychic tone. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the faint shadow of old guilt. The Protoss have made difficult choices. Entire colonies were sterilized from orbit to prevent Zerg infestation. Terran settlements were destroyed when their inhabitants proved unable to resist corruption. We do not celebrate these acts, but neither do we regret them. The alternative, allowing the plague to spread, would have resulted in far greater suffering. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Crichton quoted. Heard that before, too. It's a great philosophy right up until you're one of the few getting sacrificed. Mohandar's agitation was palpable, even without the psychic link. You judge from ignorance, human. You have not faced the Zerg. You have not watched worlds consumed, populations assimilated into the swarm, your own brothers turned into monsters. We fought for survival against annihilation itself. Actually, Crichton said quietly, we've faced something similar. We've all lost people, entire civilizations. And yeah, sometimes we've had to make calls that haunt us. The difference is we don't pretend those choices were righteous. We live with the guilt. The statement hung in the charged air of the Hall of Contemplation. Jean placed a gentle hand on Crichton's arm, sending calming thoughts through her own empathic abilities. Dargo remained tense but silent, he clearly reassessing these alien warriors in light of their shared trauma. Judicator Nahan spoke, the voice carrying the weight of religious authority. The Kala absolves us of individual guilt. When we act in unity, the burden is shared across all Protoss. No single warrior bears the weight of necessary sacrifice alone. Must be nice, Crichton muttered. Collective responsibility means nobody's really responsible. It means everyone is responsible, Celendis corrected sharply. Every Protoss who lives today carries the memory of every choice our race has made. Through the Kala, I experience the anguish of Templar who ordered orbital bombardments. I feel the resolve of High Templar, who channeled psionic storms that scoured continents. We do not forget. We simply do not allow guilt to paralyze us. Jean's eyes widened slightly. It was such a burden, to carry the accumulated trauma of an entire species. It is both burden and strength, Celendis acknowledged. Now, you will show us this region's political structure. We must understand the dynamics before determining our course of action. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. Not the crude light projections Crichton was familiar with, but a fully three-dimensional construct woven from psionic energy and matter manipulation. It showed the sector of space they currently occupied, empty of detail but waiting to be filled. Dargo moved to the display, his tactical experience taking over despite his misgivings. The Peacekeepers control approximately 60% of charted space in this region, he explained, watching as the hologram filled in territories based on his thoughts. The Kala, apparently allowing direct mental interface. Their command structure is rigid, High Command at the center, followed by Special Directorate, Field Commanders, and finally the enlisted ranks. They breed soldiers in military installations, conditioning them from birth to serve. Aaron's voice came through the comm again, sharper now. John, pilots picking up increased Peacekeeper activity on the edge of the system, multiple Prowler signatures. They know something's here. Crichton's stomach sank. Executor, we may have a problem. The Peacekeepers have likely detected your vessel. They're going to investigate, and when they do, we will demonstrate Protoss strength, Mohandar interjected, his psionic blades flaring brighter. Let them witness what occurs when tyranny confronts righteousness. No, Celendis countered, though there was reluctance in her psychic voice. We are not yet prepared for open conflict. We must understand this region's full dynamics before committing to action. She turned her glowing eyes to Crichton. Can your vessel evade these Peacekeepers? Moya's good at running, Crichton confirmed, but your carrier is going to light up every sensor array for 50 systems. You can't exactly hide that thing. We do not hide, Judicator Nahan stated coldly. The Protoss do not cower before threats. Then you're going to start a war you don't understand with an enemy that has resources you can't imagine, Dargo growled. Is that your vaunted wisdom? The three Protoss exchanged another silent consultation through the Kala. Ian Crichton watched the play of emotions across their alien features, pride warring with pragmatism, conviction battling against uncertainty. These were beings accustomed to absolute certainty, to having clear enemies and righteous purpose. The uncharted territories had no clear enemies, only survivors and predators. Finally, Selendis spoke. We will withdraw. For now. There is wisdom in understanding an opponent before engaging them. You will return to your vessel. We will observe these peacekeepers from a distance and assess their capabilities. A strategic retreat, Jean said diplomatically. Wise executor. Not retreat. Reconnaissance? The distinction was clearly important to Selendis. We will reconvene when you have prepared more comprehensive intelligence. Until then, we remain watchful. And Taro Tassadar, and the transport beam activated before anyone could respond, dissolving them back into thought and reconstituting them aboard Moya. Crichton stumbled as his molecules remembered how to be solid, catching himself against a bulkhead. That, he announced to the empty transport chamber, was either the beginning of a beautiful friendship or the start of a catastrophic disaster. I'm betting on the disaster. Aaron's voice came through the ship-wide comm. John, get to command. The peacekeepers are closing fast and they're not alone. Pilots identifying the transponder code. It's Scorpius's command carrier. Crichton ran. The command chamber of Scorpius's carrier was a study in controlled menace. Unlike the organic warmth of Moya or the crystalline grandeur of the Protoss vessel, this was pure peacekeeper efficiency. Cold metal, harsh lighting, and the constant hum of weapon systems primed for immediate deployment. Scorpius stood at the central tactical display, his half-Scaran physiology giving him an appearance that unsettled even hardened peacekeeper officers. His leather coat hung perfectly still despite the carrier's movement, and the cooling rods embedded in his skull pulsed with faint light as his hybrid mind processed tactical data at superhuman speed. Magnify, he commanded, his voice a soft rasp that somehow carried absolute authority. The holographic display expanded, showing the golden Protoss carrier in exquisite detail. Lieutenant Brasa, Scorpius's adjutant, stood at attention nearby, his peacekeeper discipline barely concealing his unease. Sir, the vessel doesn't match any known configuration in our databases. The energy signature is unprecedented. Our analysts believe it could generate enough power to annihilate an entire planetary defense grid. Not could, Lieutenant, would. Scorpius leaned closer to the display, his black eyes gleaming with something between fascination and hunger. This is not mere technology. Observe the structural integration, crystalline matrices interwoven with metallic alloys that our sensors cannot fully penetrate. And the energy patterns suggest psionic amplification on a scale that makes Delvian abilities look primitive. Bracha consulted his datapad. Initial sensor sweeps detected 3 lifeform transfers between the unknown vessel and Moya. Crichton's Leviathan was in proximity when the spatial anomaly manifested. Of course it was. Scorpius's thin lips curved in something that might have been a smile. John Crichton possesses a unique talent for encountering the extraordinary. First wormhole technology, now this. The universe seems determined to deliver cosmic significance to his doorstep. Orders, sir? We could disable Moya, retrieve Crichton for interrogation. No, Scorpius raised one pale hand. Crichton is valuable, but he is also unpredictable. If we move against him now, his Leviathan will starburst, and we'll learn nothing about these visitors. Better to observe, to understand what we're dealing with before revealing our interest. He moved to another display showing peacekeeper fleet positions across the sector. Deploy reconnaissance drones in a wide perimeter. I want constant monitoring of both Moya and the Golden Vessel. Passive sensors only. Nothing that could be construed as aggressive action. And Lieutenant? Sir? Prepare my personal marauder. If negotiations become necessary, I will conduct them myself. Something tells me these beings value hierarchy. Aboard Moya, controlled chaos reigned. They're not pursuing, Aaron reported from the weapons console, her peacekeeper training reading tactical patterns in the dispersing peacekeeper formation. Scorpius is hanging back. That's not like him. Crichton paced the command chamber, his mind racing through scenarios. He's watching, learning. Scorpius doesn't do anything without 5 backup plans and a guarantee of maximum advantage. Then he's smarter than these Protoss, Dargo rumbled, lowering himself into one of Moya's organic pilot stations. They speak of wisdom and balance, but I saw warriors barely restrained from violence. Their zealot wanted to attack us for simple questions. Jeanne floated in meditative posture near the center of the chamber, her consciousness still processing the profound contact with the Kala. They are not evil, Dargo. Misguided, perhaps? Rigid in their convictions. But I sensed genuine pain in Selendis when she spoke of their cleansings. They carry tremendous guilt, even if they hide it behind collective justification. Guilt doesn't stop genocide, Aaron stated flatly. I've seen what happens when people convince themselves their cruelty serves a higher purpose. The peacekeepers do it every cycle. Pilot's multi-layered voice emerged from the calm. Forgive my interruption, but Moya and I have been discussing the Protoss vessel. She found the contact disquieting. The ship itself possesses awareness, but it's not like Leviathan consciousness. It's subordinate to the crew, completely integrated into their psionic network. Moya considers that a form of slavery. Rigel, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their return, spoke up from his throne sled. Slavery, righteousness, purity, it's all the same tyranny wearing different clothes. I've ruled long enough to recognize conquerors when I see them. These Protoss will decide they know what's best for everyone, and then enforce it at the point of their glowing swords. Psyblades, Crichton corrected absently. And yeah, I got the same vibe. They're like religious crusaders with superweapons. Everything is black and white, good and evil, pure and corrupt. No room for the gray that makes up 90% of actual life. Aaron moved closer to him, her voice dropping. Which means when they learn what we've done, the compromises we've made, the people we couldn't save, the times we've worked with criminals or worse just to survive, they'll judge us as corrupt too. The thought hung heavy in the recycled air. Moya's crew had survived by being pragmatic, by making impossible choices, by sometimes allying with their enemies when the alternative was death. To beings who saw the universe in absolutes, such flexibility would look like moral weakness. Or worse, like corruption worth cleansing. Pilot, Crichton said suddenly, can you establish a secure channel to the Protoss carrier? Something Scorpius can't intercept? Moya believes so, yes. The Protoss vessel's communication systems operate on psionic frequencies that Peacekeeper technology cannot detect. What did you have in mind? Crichton moved to the central display, calling up star charts of the region. If we're going to stop the Protoss from starting a war with the Peacekeepers, or from deciding we're all too impure to live, we need to show them what this universe is really like, not through descriptions, but through experience. Dargo's eyes narrowed. You want to take them somewhere? Not somewhere, someone. Crichton's fingers traced a route through the uncharted territories. There's a trading station about 2 solar days from here. Multi-species, independent, outside Peacekeeper jurisdiction. It's chaotic, morally questionable, and absolutely full of people just trying to survive. If the Protoss want to understand this region, they need to see it at ground level. Jeanne nodded slowly. A trial by immersion, such they will witness the complexity they currently dismiss. Or they'll declare the entire station corrupt and incinerate it from orbit, Aaron countered. These are beings who admit to destroying civilian populations, John. Taking them into a crowd of refugees and black market traders could end in mass murder. Could. But it might also crack that armor of absolute certainty. Crichton looked at each of his crewmates in turn. Look, I'm not saying the Protoss are wrong about everything. Fighting against genocidal space bugs? Noble cause. But they're applying a combat mentality to a whole universe that doesn't work that way. Someone needs to show them that before Scorpius decides they're a threat, and the Peacekeepers throw everything they have at them. And if the Peacekeepers win that fight? Rigel asked pointedly. Oh, then Scorpius gets his hands on Protoss technology, Crichton said grimly. Psionic weapons, energy shielding, ships that can level planets. Everything he'd need to make the Peacekeepers unstoppable. The implications silenced the chamber. Finally, Pilot spoke. Commander Crichton, Moya concurs with your assessment. The risk of inaction exceeds the danger of engagement. Shall I contact the Protoss? Do it. Tell them we have a proposal, a cultural exchange. They want to understand this region? We'll show them. Up close and personal. The comm systems hummed as Pilot established the psionic frequency connection. Moments later, Executor Celendis's mental voice resonated through the chamber, accessible to all present. Human Crichton, your vessel contacts us with unusual urgency. Speak. Executor, you said you needed to understand local dynamics before taking action. We're offering you that chance. There's a neutral station 2 days from here, dozens of species, independent operators, people who exist outside major political structures. Come with us. Not in your carrier. That thing screams military intervention. Send a small team. Walk among the beings you'd be affecting with your decisions. A pause. Crichton could almost feel thousands of Protoss minds discussing this through their kala, weighing honor against pragmatism, pride against curiosity. You propose we lower ourselves to mingle with common traitors and criminals. I propose you do what you said, gather intelligence, real intelligence, not just tactical data. You want to know if the peacekeepers are worth opposing? See what life is like for the people they rule. You want to judge this region's worth? Look it in the eye first. Another pause, longer this time. We will consider this proposal. Stand by. The connection terminated. Aaron immediately moved to the sensor console. Scorpius's drones are repositioning. He knows we're communicating with them. Let him watch, Crichton said. Maybe if he sees us acting as intermediaries instead of threats, he'll hold back long enough for us to prevent a catastrophe. Dargo's laugh was bitter. You're assuming Scorpius wants to prevent catastrophe? More likely, he's calculating how to use the Protoss for his own purposes, or how to dissect them for their technology. Then we'd better move fast, Crichton turned to Pilot. Start plotting a course to the trading station. Keep it looking casual, like normal commerce traffic. If the Protoss agree to come along, we'll need to look non-threatening. Understood, Commander. Jean drifted closer to Crichton, her voice gentle. You're placing great faith in the Protoss's capacity for growth, John. What if they truly cannot see beyond their absolutes? Then we're all screwed anyway, Crichton admitted. But I met their eyes, well, their glowing energy eyes, and I saw something under all that righteous conviction. Doubt. Maybe just a flicker, but it was there. These are beings who've made terrible choices and live with the consequences every day, even if they won't admit it. If we can tap into that doubt, make them question their assumptions, we might save millions of lives, Aaron finished. Or condemn ourselves by revealing our own moral compromises. Story of our lives. Crichton managed a crooked smile. High risk, uncertain reward, a probable disaster, just another day in the uncharted territories. The comm crackled back to life. Celendis's mental voice carried a note of what might have been grudging respect. We accept your proposal, Human Crichton. A delegation will accompany your vessel to this trading station. We will observe these beings you claim to be complex. But understand, if we witness corruption, exploitation, or cruelty, we will respond accordingly. The Protoss do not tolerate injustice. Define injustice, Crichton muttered under his breath. Then louder, understood, Executor. We'll rendezvous in 1 Arn. Moya out. As the connection terminated, he turned to find his entire crew staring at him with varying expressions of concern, resignation, and exasperation. Well, Rigel said dryly, I suppose it's too late to mutiny and flee to the far side of the galaxy? Way too late, Crichton confirmed. Pilot, execute the course. Everyone else, start thinking about how we explained black markets, moral gray areas, and survival-based ethics to aliens who think in terms of divine purity. This will end badly, Aaron predicted. Probably, Crichton agreed. But maybe we can control how badly. That's something, right? No one answered. The silence spoke volumes. Outside, in the cold void of space, Scorpius watched the exchange through his passive sensors and smiled his terrible smile. The game had just become far more interesting. The trading station designated Commerce Platform Tertius. 9 hung in the void like a mechanical tumor, asymmetric, constantly expanding, built from salvaged components of 100 different species technologies. Sections of Peacekeeper hull plating merged awkwardly with Luxan military architecture. Hynerian commercial modules jutted from Sebacean habitation rings. The entire structure pulsed with life, commerce, desperation, and the kind of moral flexibility that came from existing in the cracks between official jurisdictions. Crichton stood at Moya's forward observation port, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Behind him, the Protoss delegation waited in what he generously termed patient silence, but which felt more like predatory assessment. Selendis had sent 3 representatives. The executor herself remained aboard the carrier, maintaining constant psionic contact with her team. Instead, she dispatched High Templar Karas, whose ornate robes and heavily armored form suggested both spiritual authority and combat readiness. Alongside him came Zealot Solanas, a female warrior whose psi blades remained mercifully dormant, but whose aggressive stance suggested they could activate in microseconds. The third member surprised Crichton, a Dark Templar named Zeratol, whose presence had caused visible tension among the other Protoss. Unlike his Kali brethren, Zeratol wore armor of deep shadow hues rather than gold and white. His eyes glowed green instead of gold, and most significantly, he lacked connection to the Kala. The Dark Templar had been severed from the psionic network generations ago, choosing individual thought over collective unity, a schism that still caused friction despite centuries of uneasy reconciliation. "Ma, your station is inefficient," Karas observed, his mental voice carrying the weight of someone commenting on a particularly offensive architectural failure. Random expansion without central planning. Structural integrity appears compromised in at least 17 sections. "That's what happens when nobody's in charge," Crichton replied. "People build what they need with what they've got. It's ugly, but it works." "Barely," Solanas added, her hand unconsciously moving toward where her psi blades would manifest. "I detect numerous weapon signatures. This place is armed for conflict." "Everyone's armed everywhere," Aaron said from the piloting station. She'd insisted on accompanying the delegation, unwilling to let Crichton face potential disaster alone. "It's the uncharted territories. You trust your weapon before you trust your neighbor." Zeratol spoke for the first time, his mental voice distinctly different from the others, more individualized, carrying personal nuance rather than the echo of collective thought. "Trust is earned through action, not assumed through unity." Perhaps these station dwellers understand something the Kalai have forgotten. Karas's nerve cords twitched with visible irritation. "The Dark Templars speak of division as wisdom. This is why you were severed from the Kala. Your inability to embrace unity leads only to chaos." "And your unity led to the aeon of strife," Zeratol countered calmly. "But this is not the time for old arguments. We are here to observe, not to replay ancient schisms." Dargo, who had also insisted on joining the delegation despite the crowded transport pod, rumbled appreciatively. "Your people have internal conflicts, good. Means you're not as unified as you pretend." "We are unified in purpose," Karas stated firmly. "Philosophical differences do not negate our commitment to protecting the innocent and opposing corruption." "Keep telling yourself that," Dargo muttered. The transport pod detached from Moya with a gentle lurch, Aaron piloting them toward Tertius 9's main docking bay. The structure loomed larger, and through the viewport, they could see the organized chaos of the station's exterior. Ships of every configuration docking and departing, repair drones welding new sections onto existing structures, and the occasional flash of weapons fire from areas where disputes were being settled the old-fashioned way. "Combat," Solanas observed, are her warrior instincts immediately assessing the distant exchange. "Should we intervene?" "No," Crichton said firmly. "Not our business, and not yours either. Out here, people settle their own problems." "Even when innocents might be harmed?" "We don't know if there are innocents involved. Could be 2 criminal organizations fighting over territory. Could be a legal duel. Could be a dozen other things. Point is, we don't have enough information to judge, so we don't interfere." Karas's disapproval radiated through the psionic link. "Inaction in the face of potential injustice is itself unjust." "Or it's wisdom," Zeratol countered. The Dark Templar learned long ago that not every battle is ours to fight. Sometimes the greater service is restraint. The pod slipped into the docking bay, which proved to be a cavernous space filled with vessels ranging from elegant Sebastian yachts to battered cargo haulers held together with prayer and duct tape. Aaron set them down in an assigned berth, and the airlock cycled with a hiss that spoke of barely maintained atmospheric integrity. "Right," Crichton said, turning to face the Protoss. "Ground rules. You're here to observe, not judge. Don't read people's minds without permission. That's considered extremely rude and will get you stabbed. Don't activate weapons unless someone attacks you first. And for the love of all that's holy, try not to look like you're about to purge the station from orbit." "We do not purge without cause," Karas objected. "Great. Let's keep it that way." Crichton checked his pulse pistol and nodded to Aaron. "So, let's go see the underbelly of galactic civilization." The airlock opened, and they stepped into Tertius 9. The station's interior assaulted the senses immediately. The air was thick with a mixture of atmospheric preferences. Too humid for Sebastians, too dry for aquatics, compromised for everyone. Lighting came from a patchwork of sources, creating pools of shadow between harsh illumination. The smell was indescribable. Cooking food from a dozen species, industrial lubricants, unwashed bodies, exotic spices, and things Crichton preferred not to identify. And the noise, traders haggling in 20 languages, machinery grinding and hissing, music blaring from competing establishments, arguments, laughter, the occasional scream. It was chaos incarnate, humanity and post-humanity and non-humanity in its rawest, most unfiltered form, and the Protoss stopped dead. Karas's mental voice carried something Crichton had never heard from them before. Genuine shock. "This is disorder. Complete disorder. How do these beings function without structure?" "They function fine," Aaron said, leading them into the main concourse. "Better than fine, actually. The station does more trade volume than some peacekeeper-controlled planets." They moved through the crowds, and Crichton watched the Protoss react to their new environment. Solanas tracked every potential threat with a warrior's vigilance, her body language screaming military training to anyone observant enough to notice. Karas seemed overwhelmed by the sheer variety of beings, species he'd never encountered, customs that made no sense, interactions that defied his understanding of proper order. But Zeratul observed with what looked like fascination. His green eyes tracked not just the chaos, but the patterns within it, the way traders negotiated, the subtle hierarchies of respect and fear, the unspoken rules that kept total anarchy at bay. They passed a food vendor where a Hynerian merchant was arguing with a Luxon customer over the price of some unidentifiable meat. The argument was loud, involved aggressive gesturing, and looked ready to escalate to violence at any moment. Solanus' psi blades flickered to life. "They're going to fight. We should—" "Wait," Crichton said. The argument reached a crescendo, both parties screaming in each other's faces. Then suddenly the Luxan laughed, a deep, booming sound. The Hynerian laughed too. They clasped forearms in the Luxan gesture of respect, and the merchant handed over the meat at a slightly reduced price. "Negotiation," Dargo explained, grinning. "Aggressive haggling is expected in trade culture. If you don't argue, you're not respecting the merchant's skill." "But they appeared ready to kill each other," Karas protested. "Appeared, yeah. Actually going to? Probably not. You've got to read the situation." Crichton gestured around them. "This looks like chaos, but there's order underneath, just not the kind you're used to." They continued through the station, and gradually the Protoss began to see the patterns. A group of children, mixed species, orphans probably, playing a game in an alcove while a scarred Nebari woman kept watch, protecting them. A makeshift medical clinic run by a Delvian healer who asked no questions and charged on a sliding scale. In a dispute between two ship captains settled by a respected third party, both sides accepting the judgment because reputation mattered more than official authority. And then they saw the darker side. A Scaran enforcer shaking down a Sebastian merchant demanding protection fees with obvious menace. A Tavlek trader selling what were unmistakably slaves disguised as long-term labor contracts. A group of addicts huddled in a corner, injecting themselves with substances that made their eyes glow with unnatural colors. Karas stopped before the slave trader, his mental voice radiating cold fury. This being is trafficking in sentient lives. This is unacceptable. Yeah, it is, Crichton agreed quietly. It's also technically legal under the station's charter. They're independent, remember? No central authority means no one to enforce universal ethics. Then we shall enforce them. Karas began to stride toward the Tavlek, psionic energy beginning to crackle around his armored form. Aaron grabbed his arm, or tried to. The Protoss's energy field repelled her touch. Don't. You'll start a riot. Half the traders on this station have questionable business practices. You can't purge them all. Why not? Solanas demanded. If they profit from suffering, they deserve judgment. Zeratol moved between his fellow Protoss and the slave trader. Because judgment requires understanding context. Observe. He gestured toward the Tavlek's merchandise. Individuals who, upon closer inspection, showed signs of previous combat injuries and specialized implants. These are not innocents kidnapped from their homes. They are convicted criminals, sold into servitude as punishment for their crimes. In this region, such practices are considered more merciful than execution. Slavery as mercy? Karas sounded revolted. By the standards of those who have no prisons, no rehabilitation infrastructure, no resources for humane incarceration, Zeratol continued. Is it just? By our standards, no. By theirs? It's survival within constraints they did not choose. Crichton nodded slowly. He's right. I hate it too, but out here, ethics are complicated by necessity. These people don't have the luxury of the Kalai's collective resources. They make do with what they have. Then they need guidance, Karas insisted. They need someone to show them a better way. Like the peacekeepers do? Aaron asked sharply. The peacekeepers have resources, infrastructure, technology, and they use it to breed soldiers, conquer systems, and crush anyone who resists. Is that better? More orderly slavery instead of chaotic freedom? The question hung in the recycled air. Around them, the station continued its perpetual motion. People living, trading, surviving, sometimes thriving despite impossible circumstances. Dargo led them to an observation deck that overlooked the main market. From this vantage, the patterns became clearer. Yes, there was exploitation, but there was also cooperation between species that officially hated each other. Innovation born of necessity. Communities forming not from government mandate, but from mutual need. My father fought in the Luxan military, Dargo said quietly. He believed in honor, in serving a cause greater than himself. When I was young, I thought he was the noblest being I'd ever known. Then I learned what he'd done in the name of that honor. Villages razed, prisoners executed, all justified as military necessity, as service to the greater good. He turned to face the Protoss directly. You remind me of him? Absolutely certain of your righteousness. Convinced your cause justifies your actions. But I've lived long enough to know that certainty is dangerous. The moment you believe you can't be wrong is the moment you become capable of any atrocity. Solanas bristled. We have opposed atrocity. We have fought the Zerg for generations, preventing them from consuming entire sectors of our galaxy. Do not presume to lecture us on moral courage. I don't question your courage, Dargo replied. I question your certainty. Karas opened his mouth, metaphorically, or through the psionic link, to respond, but Zeratol held up a hand for silence. Wait, something is happening. Crichton followed the Dark Templar's gaze. In the market below, a commotion had begun. Peacekeeper soldiers, 4 of them in full combat armor, were pushing through the crowd, clearly searching for someone. Oh hell, Crichton breathed. Scorpius didn't stay away after all. The Peacekeeper soldiers moved with predatory efficiency. Their pulse rifles held at ready positions that looked casual but could transition to lethal action in microseconds. Their armor marked them as special operations. Not standard grunts, but specialists trained for high-risk extractions and wet work. Erin's hand moved instinctively to her pulse pistol. Those are Scorpius's personal guard, Black Ops unit. Or they don't deploy for routine patrols. They're hunting someone, Crichton observed, watching the soldiers question a frightened Tavlek merchant who was pointing toward one of the station's lower levels. Question is, who? The answer came seconds later as a figure burst from a side corridor, running at full sprint. She was Sebastian, young, wearing the tattered remains of a peacekeeper technical officer's uniform. Blood streaked one side of her face, and she carried a data module clutched against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the galaxy. "Help me!" she screamed into the crowd. "Please! Someone! They're going to kill me!" The crowd did what crowds always did when peacekeepers were involved: melted away, creating a clear corridor for the soldiers to pursue their target. Self-preservation trumped compassion in the uncharted territories. One of the soldiers raised his rifle. "Stand down, Technician Gila. You are property of the Peacekeeper Command. Surrender the data, and you will be processed according to regulations." "Processed means executed," the woman, Gila, shouted back, still running. "I know what's on this module. I know what you've done." The soldier's rifle hummed, charging for a kill shot, and Zealot Solanas moved. She crossed the 30 meters between the observation deck and the market floor in a blur of motion that defied physics, her psionic abilities propelling her body at speeds that left afterimages in the air. Her psi blades ignited with a sound like tearing reality, twin crescents of psychic energy that burned with righteous fury. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger. Solanas's blade intercepted the pulse bolt in mid-flight, the psionic energy absorbing and dispersing the deadly charge. She landed between the peacekeeper and his target, her armored form radiating threat. "You will not execute an unarmed fleeing individual," her mental voice boomed across the market, accessible to every mind present. "Stand down or face Templar justice." The market froze. Every eye turned to the golden-armored alien warrior who had just appeared from nowhere and blocked a peacekeeper kill shot. Crichton's stomach dropped. "Oh no, 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 no. That's exactly what I told them not to do." The lead peacekeeper soldier, a grizzled officer with scar tissue replacing one eye, assessed the new threat with professional detachment. "Unknown hostile has interfered with official peacekeeper operations. Our lethal force authorized." All 4 rifles swung toward Solanas, who smiled, a disconcerting expression given the Protoss' lack of mouths. Her nerve cords writhed in what might have been anticipation. "Bring your fury," she challenged. "I have faced the Zerg swarm. You are nothing." "Solanas, stand down!" Karas's mental command crackled with authority. "This is not our conflict." But it was too late. The peacekeepers opened fire. Pulse bolts streaked across the market in a deadly pattern designed to saturate any possible dodge path. Against a normal opponent, it would have been instantly lethal. Solanas wasn't normal. Her psi blades moved in defensive patterns too fast for the eye to follow, deflecting incoming fire with the precision of someone who had trained for centuries. Energy splashed against her personal shields. One bolt got through, scorching her shoulder armor, but she didn't even flinch. Instead, she advanced. The peacekeepers retreated, maintaining firing discipline even as their targets shrugged off weapons that could pulverize reinforced bulkheads. The lead officer spoke urgently into his comm. "Command, we have an unknown hostile, possibly Scaran advanced unit or alien technology, requesting immediate backup," and Solanas closed the distance. Her SI blade swept in a controlled arc that severed the officer's rifle in half without touching his body. The demonstration of absolute precision was clear. She could have killed him just as easily. "Surrender," she commanded. "Your weapons are insufficient. Your cause is unjust. You must surrender, or I will be forced to neutralize you permanently." Karas materialized beside her in a shimmer of psionic energy, having transported down from the observation deck. "Zealot Solanas, I command you to disengage. This is a violation of our observation parameters." "They were executing an unarmed woman," Solanas shot back, her mental voice ringing with conviction. "Would you have me stand aside and allow such injustice? This is precisely what the Templar exists to prevent." Zeratul appeared as well, though he had moved through shadow rather than teleportation, the Dark Templar way. His green eyes assessed the situation with cold calculation. "She has committed us. The question now is how we resolve this without massacre." The peacekeeper officer had backed against a market stall, his remaining soldiers forming a defensive perimeter. His hand moved towards something on his belt, likely a neural disruptor grenade. Desperation made people do stupid things. Aaron's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Officer, stand down. I'm ex-Peacekeeper Special Commando, Icarian Company. You know who I am? The officer's remaining eye widened slightly. Aaron's son, traitor, wanted for desertion, aiding enemies of the state, and conspiracy against the Peacekeeper Order. Yeah, that's me. Aaron stepped forward, her pulse pistol holstered in a deliberate show of non-aggression. Which means I know exactly how this plays out. You detonate that grenade. The alien warriors kill you instantly. Your backup arrives. They try to secure the station. And these Protoss, who have starships in orbit that make command carriers look like children's toys, decide the peacekeepers are a threat worth eliminating. Everyone dies. Everyone. She gestured to the woman cowering behind Solanis. Or you let the technician go, report back to Scorpius that you encountered unknown hostiles with superior capabilities, and live to fight another day. Tactical retreat isn't cowardice when you're outgunned. It's common sense. The officer's jaw worked. Pride warred with survival instinct. Around them, the market had completely cleared. Merchants and customers alike had fled to hiding spots, leaving only the combatants and the terrified technician. Dargo moved to Aaron's side, his qualta blade visible but not drawn. The woman has sought sanctuary. By the oldest laws of civilized space, that grants her protection. If you want to challenge sanctuary, you challenge all of us, and I don't think you have the numbers. Crichton joined them, forming a line between the Peacekeepers and the Protoss. Come on, guys, nobody needs to die over data theft. Let us take the woman. You report back. Scorpius gets his intelligence about the Protoss, which is what he really wants anyway. Everybody wins. The officer looked between them. 3 fugitives and 3 alien warriors of unknown but clearly devastating capability. His tactical computer, if he had one, would be screaming at him to withdraw. The data module contains classified Peacekeeper intelligence, he said finally. I can't let it leave this station. Then take it. Gila's voice, weak but defiant, came from behind Solanis. She held out the module with shaking hands. Nah, I already uploaded copies to 6 different secure servers across the uncharted territories. This is just insurance. You want it? Fine, but you can't stop the truth from getting out. The officer snatched the module, his movements sharp with frustration. What truth? That Scorpius has been conducting unauthorized experiments on Peacekeeper personnel, Gila said, her voice growing stronger with righteous anger. Neural modification, forced scare and hybridization. I'm a technician in his personal laboratory. I've seen what he does to people. I've watched colleagues screaming as he rewires their brains. And I'm not the only one who knows anymore. Silence. Aaron's face had gone pale. Frel. He's trying to replicate himself. The officer's expression suggested this was not new information to him, which meant he was complicit, or scared, or both. Karas stepped forward, his mental voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. Experiments on unwilling subjects. Neural torture. This Scorpius you speak of. He is an enemy of life itself. Where is he? The Templar will end this corruption immediately. No, Crichton said urgently. Karas, you can't just assassinate a Peacekeeper High Command officer. That starts a war. A war against those who torture innocents. That is a war worth fighting. It's a war you'll lose. Crichton grabbed the Protoss's arm, and this time Karas allowed the contact. The Peacekeepers have millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, resources across hundreds of systems. You've got 1 carrier and a superiority complex. Math doesn't work out. Zeratol's quiet voice cut through the argument. The human speaks tactical truth, but Karas speaks moral truth. This is the dilemma you brought us to witness, is it not, Crichton? The choice between pragmatic survival and righteous action? Crichton opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Yeah, I guess it is. The Peacekeeper officer chose that moment to activate his comm. Command. Situation resolved. Target neutralized. Returning to carrier. He looked at Gila with something that might have been pity. If I were you, I'd run. Far and fast. Scorpius doesn't forgive betrayal. Then he and his squad withdrew, moving with disciplined efficiency back toward their docked marauder. Within 2 microts, they were gone. The market remained silent for several beats, then slowly, cautiously, began to repopulate. Merchants emerged from hiding. Customers returned to their haggling. The station's perpetual motion resumed, as if the confrontation had never happened. Just another day in the uncharted territories. Gila collapsed against a support pillar, shaking with reaction. Solanas deactivated her psi blades and moved to support the woman, her warrior's pragmatism recognizing someone in shock. "You saved my life," Gila whispered. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because it was right," Solani said simply. "The Protoss do not abandon those who flee tyranny." Crichton rubbed his face, exhausted despite the confrontation lasting only microts. "Okay, new problem. We've got a peacekeeper defector with information about Scorpius's illegal experiments. Protoss warriors who now think they should declare war on the entire peacekeeper establishment. And Scorpius himself getting reports about golden aliens with superweapons. Anyone got ideas on how we don't all die horribly?" Dargo grunted. "We could start by getting off this station before Scorpius decides to reduce it to debris just to make a point." "Agreed," Aaron said. "And we need to get Gila somewhere safe. If she's telling the truth about uploading that data, every intelligence agency and criminal organization in the territories is going to be hunting her." Karas turned his glowing eyes on the technician. What were these experiments attempting to achieve? Gila looked up at the towering Protoss, fear and fascination warring on her face. Scorpius wants to create a new type of peacekeeper, enhanced intelligence, psionic abilities, resistance to interrogation. He's trying to build the perfect soldier by combining Sebacean genetics with Scaran neural architecture. But the process, it breaks people. Their minds can't handle the integration. I've watched dozens die screaming. "And you worked for him," Zeratul observed. "Not an accusation, just a statement." "I didn't have a choice," Gila's voice cracked. "I'm bred for service. You don't refuse high command assignments. You just follow orders. Until I couldn't anymore." The Dark Templar nodded slowly. "The chains of duty. I understand them well." He looked at his Kali companions. "She fled when she recognized evil. That took courage many lack. She deserves our protection." "Protection that will put us in direct opposition to this Scorpius," Karas said. "Is that your counsel, Dark Templar? That we risk war for one individual?" "I counsel," Zeratul replied quietly, "that if we are not willing to risk ourselves for one individual, we have no business claiming to protect entire civilizations." The statement hung in the charged air of the station's observation deck. Around them, the market continued its chaotic dance, survival and exploitation, cooperation and conflict, all bleeding together in the messy reality of life in the uncharted territories. Solanas spoke, her mental voice uncertain for the first time. "Executor Selendis demands a report. What do I tell her? That we have intervened? That we have committed ourselves to protecting a single refugee?" "Tell her," Crichton said slowly, an idea forming, "that we found what we came looking for. Evidence that this region doesn't fit into simple categories. That the peacekeepers aren't just orderly oppressors, but active torturers. That the chaos of independent stations isn't just anarchy, but also sanctuary. That everything is more complicated than it looks." He met Karas's glowing eyes. "You wanted to understand this place before taking action. Congratulations. You're getting the crash course." Karas was silent for a long moment. Then, "Executor Selendis concurs. We will shelter this technician aboard the Avenger, but she will be questioned. And if her information is accurate, we will determine appropriate response to this Scorpius." "Which probably means vaporizing his carrier," Aaron muttered. "Only if necessary," Karas replied. Which wasn't really a denial. Crichton looked at his crew, at the Protoss warriors, at the frightened woman they'd just pulled from the fire. "Right. So we've gone from observation mission to harboring a fugitive and possibly starting an interstellar incident. Anyone want to vote on whether this is a new low or just par for the course?" "Par for the course," everyone said simultaneously. "Fair enough." Crichton activated his comm. "Pilot, prepare Moya for immediate departure. We're leaving before this gets worse." "Worse than confronting Scorpius's special forces and committing to protect his runaway test subject?" Pilot's voice carried profound skepticism. Way worse. Trust me. As they moved toward the docking bay, Gila walking between the protective Protoss warriors, Crichton couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just crossed a threshold. The Protoss had witnessed injustice and responded with immediate action. They'd seen the moral complexity of the uncharted territories and chosen a side. The question now was whether that choice would save lives or cost them, and whether Scorpius would let them leave peacefully. Crichton strongly suspected the answer to that last question was absolutely not. The journey back to Moya was tense, silence punctuated by Gila's occasional sobs. The Peacekeeper technician sat between Solanus and Zeratul in the transport pod, her body language oscillating between relief at rescue and terror at what she'd just escaped. Crichton watched her from the pilot's seat, recognizing the 1,000-meter stare of someone whose entire worldview had shattered. He knew that look intimately. He wore it himself some days. Moya's standing by. Pilot's voice crackled through the comm. But Commander, I must inform you. The Peacekeeper presence has increased substantially. Scorpius's command carrier has moved into closer orbit, and I'm detecting at least 6 Marauder-class fighters establishing a patrol perimeter. Of course he has, Crichton muttered. Can't just let us leave peacefully. That would be too easy. Aaron was already running tactical calculations. If they wanted to stop us, they'd have interdicted our launch from the station. Scorpius is posturing. He wants us to know he's watching. Or he's waiting to see where the Protoss carrier is before committing forces, Dargo suggested. Test our capabilities without exposing himself to the Golden Ship's weapons. The transport pod slipped into Moya's docking bay with practiced ease. As the airlock cycled, Karas established contact with his executor, the psionic conversation visible only in the subtle shifts of his nerve cords and the distant look in his glowing eyes. When he returned his attention to the present, his mental voice carried new urgency. Executor Selendis has analyzed the tactical situation. She believes the Peacekeepers are probing for weakness. She recommends we demonstrate Protoss' strength immediately. A warning shot across their command carrier's bow. No, Crichton and Aaron said simultaneously. A warning shot is still a shot, Crichton continued, and Scorpius will interpret it as an act of war. You'll have given him exactly the excuse he needs to throw everything he has at both of us. Karas's frustration radiated through the psionic link. Then what do you propose? We flee? The Protoss do not flee from tyranny. You don't flee, Zeratul said quietly. You choose your battles. There is a difference. They emerged from the pod into Moya's organic corridors, on where Pilot's holographic presence awaited them. The symbiont's multiple eyes focused on Gila with something like compassion. Welcome aboard, technician. You are safe here. Moya wishes you to know that she provides sanctuary to all who need it. Thank you, Gila whispered. I don't know what I expected, but a living ship wasn't it. Moya is full of surprises, Crichton said. Pilot, what's our starburst readiness? Moya can execute starburst in approximately 4 micros, but I must warn you, she is unsettled. The Protoss carrier's presence disturbs her on a fundamental level. The ship's consciousness is so different from a Leviathan's. Subordinate rather than symbiotic. She finds it troubling. Solanus bristled. The Avenger is not enslaved if that's your implication. The ship's spirit serves willingly, are honored to carry Templar into battle. Does it have a choice? Pilot asked gently. Moya chose to bond with me. We are partners, not master and servant. Can your vessel refuse commands if it disagrees with them? The question clearly hadn't occurred to Solanus. Her silence spoke volumes. Before the philosophical debate could escalate, alarms blared through Moya's corridors. Pilot's voice crackled with alarm. Multiple high-energy signatures. Scorpius's carrier is powering weapons and, by the goddess, he's launching something. The command chamber's view screens activated, showing the Peacekeeper command carrier hanging against the stars like a mechanical predator. From its launch bays, a single sleek vessel emerged. Scorpius's personal marauder, black and silver, designed for both speed and intimidation. He's coming himself, Aaron breathed. That's either very good or catastrophically bad. Rigel, who had wisely remained aboard Moya during the station excursion, floated into the chamber on his throne sled. My extensive experience with megalomaniacs suggests it's the latter. When tyrants show up personally, it means they want something they can't trust subordinates to acquire. The marauder approached with deliberate slowness, transmitting on open frequencies. Scorpius's voice, smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen, filled the chamber. John Crichton, I know you can hear me. I propose a conversation, face to face. You, myself, and representatives of our golden visitors. I believe we have much to discuss regarding mutual survival. It's a trap, Dargo stated flatly. Obviously, Crichton agreed. Question is, what kind of trap? Scorpius doesn't do simple ambushes. He's got an angle. Karas moved to the viewport, studying the approaching marauder with a warrior's assessment. This Scorpius, Executor Selendis requires intelligence about him. Your woman Gila claims he conducts experiments on his own people. What manner of being does this? The worst kind, Aaron said quietly. Scorpius is half Sebacean, half Scaran. Created by his Scaran father as an experiment in hybrid genetics. He was tortured, trained, broken, and rebuilt into something that serves neither species completely. He's brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely convinced that the ends justify any means. And he wants wormhole technology from John's brain, Pilot added. He believes such power would allow him to achieve his ultimate goal, destroying the Scaran Imperium. Gila looked up sharply. That's not his only goal anymore. The experiments I witnessed, he's trying to create a new species, something that combines the best traits of multiple races. He calls it evolutionary acceleration. Zaratul's green eyes narrowed. Playing God, creating life in his own image. We have seen this before, in our own history. The Xel'Naga created both Protoss and Zerg as experiments in perfection. It ended in war, extinction, and suffering beyond measure. Then you understand why he must be stopped, Karas said. I understand why he must be approached carefully, Zeratul corrected. Beings who see themselves as visionaries become extremely dangerous when cornered. They will burn galaxies rather than admit failure. Scorpius's marauder took up position between Moya and the Peacekeeper carrier, in close enough to communicate but far enough to retreat if necessary. The strategy was obvious. He wanted to negotiate from a position where he could observe both the Leviathan and, presumably, the Protoss carrier lurking somewhere in nearby space. Your silence is noted, John, Scorpius transmitted again. But consider this. I have no particular desire to engage unknown hostile forces of clearly superior technological capability. Nor do I wish to see this region of space destabilized by well-meaning but catastrophically ignorant aliens attempting to bring order to the uncharted territories. Crichton's jaw clenched. He knows exactly how to push buttons. He's also not wrong, Aaron admitted. If the Protoss decide to start a crusade against the Peacekeepers, millions will die. The Peacekeepers will fight to the last ship. It'll be a bloodbath. Selendis' mental voice suddenly resonated through the chamber, the Executor having established direct psionic contact across the distance. We will transport to your position, Crichton. This Scorpius wishes to negotiate. We shall determine if he speaks truth or deceives. Wait, Crichton started, but golden light was already coalescing in the center of the chamber. 3 Protoss materialized in a shimmer of psionic energy. Executor Selendis herself, High Templar Karas, and a massive armored figure that Crichton hadn't seen before. This one wore dark armor adorned with draconic imagery and carried what appeared to be a massive psionic cannon integrated into his arm. Dragoon Talendar, Selendis introduced without preamble. He was critically wounded in battle against the Zerg. We preserved his consciousness and placed him within a mechanized battle chassis. He represents our capacity for both preservation of life and prosecution of war. The Dragoon's eyes, mounted in the chassis' head unit, glowed with fierce intelligence. His mental voice carried an odd dual quality, organic consciousness filtered through mechanical systems. I am honored to serve the Templar Executor. What would you have of me? Ensure that if this meeting becomes violent, we emerge victorious. As you command. Crichton looked at the assembled Protoss, then at his crew, then at the view screen showing Scorpius's waiting marauder. This is going to go badly. Someone tell me I'm wrong. Nobody did. Pilot, he sighed, tell Scorpius we accept his invitation to talk. But it happens here, on Moya. Neutral ground. Yam, and he comes alone. Transmitting. He's responding. He accepts your terms. He's requesting permission to dock. Granted. And pilot? Keep Moya ready to starburst on my signal. When this goes sideways, and it will, we need to be gone before anyone can react. Understood, Commander. The next few microts passed in tense preparation. Erin positioned herself near the command chamber's entrance, her pulse pistol visible and ready. Dargo took up position on the opposite side, his Qualta blade within easy reach. The Protoss arranged themselves in a triangular formation, Selendis at the point, Karas and Talander flanking. Their body language radiated readiness for instant violence. Gila huddled near Pilot's console, trying to make herself invisible. Jean had appeared and immediately moved to comfort the frightened technician, or her empathic abilities reading the woman's trauma and offering what solace she could. And Crichton stood in the center, feeling like he was about to mediate a meeting between fire and gasoline. The airlock cycled. Footsteps echoed in Moya's corridors, measured, unhurried, confident. Scorpius entered the command chamber alone, as promised. He was shorter than the Protoss, but radiated an intensity that made physical size irrelevant. His leather coat hung perfectly despite Moya's variable gravity. The cooling rods in his skull pulsed rhythmically, managing the heat of his hybrid metabolism. His black eyes swept the chamber, cataloging every threat, every advantage, every potential outcome with the speed of his enhanced cognition. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. John, how pleasant to see you've graduated from fleeing me to hosting interspecies diplomatic summits. You continue to exceed expectations. Scorpius, Crichton kept his voice level. You wanted to talk, so talk. Those black eyes shifted to the Protoss, studying them with the intensity of a scientist examining fascinating specimens. Magnificent, truly magnificent, psionic energy signatures beyond anything in our databases. Technology that appears to blend organic and mechanical principles in ways our greatest minds have never conceived. And a warrior culture that radiates from you like heat from a star. Selendis's mental voice carried Arctic chill. You are the one called Scorpius, the torturer, the experimenter, the being who mutilates his own kind in pursuit of power. I see Technician Gila has been sharing her perspective. Scorpius's gaze found the cowering woman. A limited perspective, I should note. She saw procedures, not purposes. Techniques, not goals. Allow me to provide context. There is no context that justifies torture, Karas stated flatly. No? Scorpius moved deeper into the chamber, his movements deliberate and unthreatening despite the weapons trained on him. Then perhaps you Protoss have never faced an enemy so terrible that survival required impossible choices. But I suspect you have. I can see it in your bearing. Warriors who have done terrible things for righteous reasons. Selendis's nerve cords twitched. A hit. Scorpius continued. The Scaran Imperium is an empire of conquest built on slavery, torture, and the systematic brutalization of every species they encounter. They are expanding, consuming systems at an accelerating rate. Within 20 cycles, they will dominate this entire region. The peacekeepers are all that stands between civilization and utter subjugation. The peacekeepers themselves conquer and enslave, Zeratul observed. We maintain order, Scorpius corrected. There is a difference between harsh governance and genocidal expansion. The Scarans do not govern, they devour. And your experiments? Erin demanded. How do they stop the Scarans? By creating soldiers capable of resisting Scaran interrogation. Warriors who can withstand their heat-based torture. Intelligence operatives who can infiltrate their empire without breaking. Scorpius's voice carried complete conviction. I am attempting to give my people the tools they need to survive. If that requires painful procedures, terrible sacrifices, pushing the boundaries of ethics, so be it. I will not allow the Scarans to win, because I was too squeamish to do what was necessary. The chamber fell silent. Crichton could feel the Protoss processing this. their certainty wavering in the face of Scorpius's calm pragmatism. Finally, Selendis spoke. You claim to fight tyranny while practicing tyranny yourself. This is hypocrisy. This is war, Scorpius replied. And in war, purity is a luxury reserved for those who can afford to lose. The statement hung in Moya's command chamber, like a blade suspended over all their heads. Crichton watched the Protoss absorb Scorpius's words, saw the flicker of recognition in their glowing eyes. These were warriors who had made terrible choices against the Zerg. They understood necessity's cruel mathematics, which made them vulnerable to Scorpius's manipulation. Don't, Crichton said sharply, cutting through the weighted silence. Don't let him do this. He's good, really good, at making atrocities sound reasonable. But here's what he's not telling you. He turned to face Scorpius directly. The experiments aren't just about fighting Scarans. You're trying to recreate yourself. You want to build an army of hybrids because you believe your existence, painful, torturous, agonizing as it was, proves that hybrid superiority is achievable. You're not saving the peacekeepers. You're trying to replace them. Scorpius's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those black eyes. Recognition that Crichton had struck close to truth. And even if your goals were pure, Aaron added, moving to stand beside Crichton, your methods are indefensible. I've seen peacekeeper interrogation chambers. I've witnessed what command does to prisoners. If your experiments are worse than that, and Gila's testimony suggests they are, then you've crossed every line that separates soldiers from monsters. Spoken by a woman who has killed dozens in service to the same peacekeeper command, Scorpius observed. Your hands are not clean, officer son. None of ours are. No, Aaron agreed quietly, but I recognize what I've done. I carry it. I don't dress it up in noble purpose and call it righteous. Dragoon Talandar's mechanical voice resonated through the chamber. I was placed in this chassis to preserve my life after grievous wounds. I consented to this transformation. Do your subjects consent to your procedures, Scorpius? The needs of, do they? Consent? The Dragoon's psionic cannon charged with a building hum that made everyone's hair stand on end. Scorpius met the mechanical warrior's glowing eyes without flinching. Some volunteer. Others are selected based on genetic compatibility and strategic value. Consent is complex when survival of an entire civilization is at stake. Complex, Zeratul repeated, his mental voice dripping with disdain. The word tyrants use when no is the honest answer. Selendis raised a hand, and Talandar's weapon powered down. The executor's nerve cords moved in patterns that suggested deep thought. Thousands of Protoss minds debating through the Kala. When she spoke, her mental voice carried the weight of collective decision. We have heard your justifications, Scorpius. We are not convinced. However, we are also not convinced that your immediate elimination would serve the greater balance. The situation you describe, the Scaran threat, requires verification before we determine appropriate action. Executor, Karas protested. Surely you don't believe? I believe that war against a conquering empire is preferable to war against those defending themselves from conquest, Selendis interrupted. If the Scarans are truly as Scorpius describes, then eliminating the peacekeepers serves only chaos. But neither will we allow his experiments to continue unchallenged. She turned her glowing eyes on Scorpius. You will cease your neural modification procedures. You will release all current subjects and provide them medical care. In exchange, we will investigate the Scaran threat independently. If we determine they pose genuine danger to this region's balance, we will discuss cooperation. Crichton's jaw dropped. Wait, you're negotiating with him. After everything, we are being pragmatic, Selendis stated. As you counseled us to be. The universe is complex. Actions have consequences. We cannot simply destroy every being who offends our moral sensibilities, or we become the tyrants we claim to oppose. Scorpius's smile was genuine this time. How refreshingly reasonable. I accept your terms, with one modification. I will suspend neural procedures pending your investigation, but I cannot release subjects already integrated into the program. The process is irreversible. Attempting to reverse it would kill them. Convenient, Dargo growled. Truthful, Scorpius countered. I am many things, but I do not waste resources. My subjects are valuable assets. Killing them serves no purpose. Gila's voice, small but determined, cut through the debate. He's lying. The procedures can be halted. I've seen the medical protocols. It's dangerous, yes, but possible. He just doesn't want to lose his experimental data. Scorpius turned to regard her with the detached interest of an entomologist examining a particularly troublesome insect. Technician Gila. Your expertise is in systems maintenance, not neurology. You observed procedures you were not qualified to understand. Your moral objections, while quaint, are based on incomplete information. I watched people die screaming, Gila shot back, finding courage in desperation. I watched you dissect their brains while they were still conscious because you said the data was more valuable if collected during active neural activity. Don't tell me I don't understand. The chamber went very, very quiet. Selendis's mental voice, when it came, vibrated with barely controlled fury. You torture conscious subjects for research purposes? Anesthesia compromises neural readings, Scorpius explained, with the calm of someone discussing weather patterns. The procedures are unpleasant but necessary for... He never finished the sentence. Karas moved with the speed of psionic teleportation, crossing the chamber in an instant. His hand, crackling with psionic storm energy, closed around Scorpius's throat and lifted the hybrid off the deck. Unpleasant. You call systematic torture unpleasant. Karas! Selendis's command cracked like thunder. Stand down. No. The High Templar's voice carried absolute conviction. This being is abomination. He speaks of necessity while inflicting suffering for knowledge's sake. This is not war. This is evil. Scorpius, even with a Protoss warrior's hand crushing his windpipe, managed to rasp out words. Kill me, and you'll start. War you claim? To avoid? Then we shall fight that war. Karas's hand tightened, psionic energy beginning to arc across Scorpius's body. Better to die opposing tyranny than to compromise with monsters. Karas, I command you as executor. Release him. But the High Templar was beyond listening. Centuries of wartime decisions, of planets cleansed and innocents sacrificed, and of guilt suppressed through the Kala's collective absorption. All of it focused on this one hybrid torturer who represented everything the Protoss had sworn to oppose. Scorpius's face was turning purple. His eyes bulged. The cooling rods in his skull began to spark. And Dragoon, Talander's psionic cannon swung toward Karas. Brother Templar, the Dragoon's mechanical voice carried profound sorrow. I do not wish to fire upon you, but the Executor has given a command. You will obey, or I will ensure you obey. Erin had her pulse pistol aimed at Talander. Dargo's Qualta blade was drawn, positioned between the Dragoon and Crichton. Jean was attempting to project calming psychic influence, but the turbulent emotions in the chamber overwhelmed even her considerable abilities. And in the midst of the chaos, Zeratul moved. When the Dark Templar didn't attack Karas or defend Scorpius, instead, he placed one hand on Karas's shoulder and projected something into the High Templar's consciousness, not force, but memory. Karas gasped as images flooded his awareness. Crichton, connected to the scene through proximity to Jean's empathic field, caught fragments. Dark Templar being hunted by their Kalai brethren for the crime of rejecting the collective. Protoss warriors executing their own people for thought crime. The aeon of strife, when the Protoss had turned on each other in ideological warfare that nearly destroyed their species. This path, Zeratul's quiet mental voice penetrated Karas's rage, leads to the horrors we swore never to repeat. Killing in hot blood. Execution without trial. Becoming the thing we fight. Karas's hand trembled. Psionic energy flickered, threatening to discharge. He deserves death, the High Templar whispered. Perhaps, Zeratul acknowledged, but not from you. Not like this. Not in a moment of fury that you will carry through the Kala for all time, forcing every Protoss to share your guilt, your rage, your loss of control. The words penetrated where commands could not. Slowly, agonizingly, Karas released his grip. Scorpius dropped to the deck, gasping and clutching his throat. The cooling rods in his skull flared as his Hybrid metabolism fought to recover. Wise counsel, Dark Templar, Selendis said quietly. Karas, you will return to the Avenger and meditate until you have regained control. This is not request. It is command. Karas bowed his head, shame radiating from his armored form. As you will, in Executor. He vanished in a shimmer of psionic energy, teleporting back to the carrier. Scorpius climbed to his feet with surprising dignity, given he'd just been nearly strangled by an alien warrior monk. His voice was rough but steady. That was instructive. Your High Templar nearly killed me despite direct orders from his superior. You speak of unity and discipline, but you are as prone to passion as any Sabatian. We are not perfect, Selendis acknowledged. We struggle with our nature daily. The difference between us and you, Scorpius, is that we recognize our struggles as failings to overcome, not justifications for atrocity. A fine distinction when viewed from the comfort of moral superiority, Scorpius replied, massaging his bruised throat. Less fine when survival hangs in the balance. Crichton stepped between them before the philosophy debate could reignite. Okay, here's what's going to happen. Scorpius, you're going to take your marauder and go back to your carrier. You're going to suspend the neural experiments, and you're going to give us time to verify your Scaran threat independently. The Protoss are going to investigate without starting a war, and everyone is going to step back from the brink of mutually assured destruction. Agreed? And Technician Gila? Scorpius asked. Stays with us, Aaron stated flatly. She's claimed asylum. She possesses classified peacekeeper intelligence, which she's already distributed, Crichton reminded him. Yes, killing her accomplishes nothing except making you feel better about being exposed. Scorpius considered this with his usual calculating intensity. Finally, he nodded. Very well. The technician is irrelevant to my larger goals. She may have her asylum. He turned toward the exit, then paused. But understand this, John, all of you. The Scaran threat is real. I have fought them for cycles. I have seen what they do to conquered populations. If you investigate and find I speak truth, remember that my methods, however distasteful, serve a genuine defensive purpose. And if we find you're exaggerating the threat to justify your experiments, Dargo challenged, I will continue doing what I have always done, whatever is necessary to ensure my people survive. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing in Moya's corridors, until the airlock cycled shut behind him. The command chamber remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Rigel voiced what everyone was thinking. Did we just negotiate a truce with Scorpius? Are we insane? Probably, Crichton admitted. But the alternative was war. And as much as I hate agreeing with Scorpius about anything, he's right that we can't just kill everyone who offends our morality. We'd never stop. Selendis turned her glowing eyes on him. You warned us the uncharted territories would challenge our certainties. You were correct. We have witnessed slavery and suffering, torture and pragmatic evil. We have seen beings fleeing tyranny and tyrants claiming defensive necessity. Nothing is simple. No, Crichton agreed quietly. It's not. Welcome to the real universe. It's awful here. But not without hope, Jeanne added, her hand resting gently on Gila's shoulder. This woman chose conscience over comfort. The Dark Templar chose wisdom over vengeance. Even now, in this moment of compromise, choices were made that preserved life rather than taking it. That is hope, however small. Zeratul bowed to the Delvian priest. Your perception honors us, Paujan. Perhaps there is more to learn from this region than we initially recognized. Selendis gestured, and Dragoon Talander lowered his weapon. We will investigate the Scaran Imperium as promised, but we will also maintain observation of Scorpius. If he resumes his experiments, or if he violates this agreement, we will respond. This I swear by the Kala. Fair enough, Crichton said. Pilot, where's Scorpius's carrier? Withdrawing to the edge of the system, Commander. It appears he's honoring the ceasefire. For now. Aaron's voice carried the weight of experience. Scorpius always honors agreements, until the moment it becomes advantageous not to. We bought time, nothing more. Time's something, Dargo said. Gives us a chance to prepare for whatever comes next. What came next, as it turned out, was Pilot's alarmed voice cutting through the chamber. Commander, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures entering the system. Configuration matches. Oh no, they're Scarran. Every eye turned to the view screen, where a dozen massive dreadnoughts were emerging from hyperspace, to their blood-red hulls bristling with weapons, and they were headed straight for Moya's position. You were saying about time? Rigel squeaked. The Scarran dreadnoughts moved through space with predatory intent, their crimson hulls reflecting the distant stars like dried blood. Each vessel dwarfed Moya completely, and their weapons arrays, designed for planetary bombardment as much as ship-to-ship combat, painted targeting solutions across everything in the system. Frel, Aaron breathed, her Peacekeeper tactical training automatically cataloging the threat. That's a full assault group, 12 dreadnoughts, at least 30 escort frigates, and her face went pale. That's a Devastator-class flagship. They don't deploy those unless they're planning to annihilate something. Pilot's voice carried barely controlled panic. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The message is, Commander, they're demanding immediate surrender of Peacekeeper assets and alien co-conspirators. They claim the system is now under Scarran jurisdiction. Co-conspirators? Crichton looked at the Protoss. They know about you. How the hell do they already know about you? Selendis's nerve cords writhed with agitation. We detected no Scarran reconnaissance. Our sensors would have... Your sensors are calibrated for your home universe, Zeratol interrupted, his green eyes fixed on the tactical display. In this dimension, different technologies may operate beyond your detection range. We have been observed without knowing it. Dargo was already moving to the weapons console, his warrior instincts taking over. Moya's defenses are useless against that kind of firepower. We need to starburst immediately. Starburst won't help, Aaron said grimly. Scarran dreadnoughts carry gravitic interdiction fields. They can prevent faster-than-light travel across an entire star system. We're trapped. Scorpius's voice crackled through the comm, his marauder already accelerating back toward Moya. John, I hope you're receiving this. The Scarrans have been monitoring this system since your Protoss friends arrived. They must have detected the dimensional rift. Now they've committed significant forces to capture or destroy these new players before anyone else can analyze the technology. For once, we agree on timing, Crichton muttered. He activated the comm. Scorpius, what are our options here? Extremely limited. My carrier can engage, but we're outnumbered 3-1. The Peacekeeper reinforcements are 14 arns away, too far to matter. Unless your golden allies possess weapons to match their impressive appearance, we're all about to have a very educational experience with Scarran interrogation techniques. Selendis's mental voice resonated with icy resolve. Executor Selendis to Carrier Avenger. All Templar, prepare for combat. These Scarrans wish to test Protoss strength? We shall educate them. On the view screen, the golden Protoss carrier shimmered into visibility, decloaking from whatever stealth technology had kept it hidden. It moved with fluid grace that belied its massive size, positioning itself between Moya and the approaching Scarran fleet. The effect on the Scarran formation was immediate. Their neat attack pattern broke apart as sensors struggled to analyze the unknown vessel. Even at this distance, Crichton could see weapon systems cycling through targeting solutions, trying to lock onto a ship that radiated more energy than a small star. The Scarran flagship's commander broadcast on open channels, his voice a deep rumble that carried the arrogance of a species accustomed to dominating every encounter. Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Scarran territorial claims. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Your technology will be seized. Your crew will be interrogated. Compliance is not optional. Selendis's response was delivered through direct psionic projection, bypassing all communications technology to manifest directly in the minds of every being in the Scarran fleet. The psychic assault was so powerful that even the non-telepathic crew members aboard Moya felt it like pressure against their skulls. I am Executor Selendis of the Protoss Templar. We recognize no territorial claims by those who conquer through brutality. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences of challenging the Firstborn. The Scarran commander's laugh was like grinding stone. Threats from aliens who know nothing of Scarran might. You possess one ship. We possess 12. Mathematics suggests your destruction is inevitable. Then let us test your mathematics. The Protoss carrier's crystalline structures suddenly blazed with light. Energy patterns that Moya's sensors couldn't fully analyze began building across the hull. And then, with a sound that existed somewhere between physical and psychic reality, the carrier opened fire. Twin beams of concentrated psionic energy, each one brilliant blue-white and impossibly dense, lanced across the void. And they struck the lead Scarran dreadnought amidships with devastating precision. The vessel's shields, designed to withstand peacekeeper plasma cannons and even nuclear weapons, lasted exactly 1.3 seconds before catastrophic failure. The beams punched through the hull like it was paper. Atmosphere vented. Internal explosions cascaded through multiple decks. The dreadnought listed, losing power, becoming a drifting hulk in seconds. By the goddess, Jean whispered. They crippled it in one strike. Not crippled, Erin corrected, her voice tight with professional assessment. Destroyed. That ship is dead. They're just too big to explode all at once. The Scarran fleet's response was immediate and overwhelming. Every remaining dreadnought opened fire simultaneously, filling space with plasma bolts, disruptor beams, and missile salvos that would have obliterated a peacekeeper command carrier. The Protoss carrier's shields flared to life, not the conventional deflector screens Crichton was familiar with, but layered energy barriers that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons fire struck them and simply dispersed, absorbed, redirected into harmless radiation. Impossible, Erin breathed. Nothing can withstand that much firepower. They're not just blocking it, Pilot reported, his voice filled with awe. Moya's sensors indicate they're converting incoming kinetic and thermal energy into additional power for their shields. They're using the Scarran weapons to strengthen their defenses. Dragoon Talandar's mechanical voice carried grim satisfaction. The Protoss have fought enemies far more numerous than this. The Zerg swarm in millions. These Scarrans bring dozens. They are not prepared for Templar warfare. The carrier fired again, and another dreadnought died. Then a third volley, and a fourth. Each shot was surgical, targeted at critical systems, engines, weapons, command structures. The Protoss weren't trying to simply destroy. They were methodically dismantling the Scarran fleet's combat effectiveness. But the Scarrans were adapting. Their formation shifted, spreading out to avoid being targeted in groups. Their weapons fire became more coordinated, concentrating on single points of the Protoss shields in an attempt to create localized failures. And they launched their boarding craft. What the hell? Crichton watched as dozens of armored assault pods erupted from the Scarran frigates, rocketing toward the Protoss carrier on suicide trajectories. They're trying to board? That's insane. That's Scarran tactics, Erin explained. They're warriors who prefer close combat. They're trying to get troops onto the carrier, bypass the shields, and destroy it from within. Selendis's mental voice carried something that might have been amusement. They believe they can match Templar in personal combat. They shall learn otherwise. The assault pods struck the carrier's hull, and Crichton could only imagine what was happening inside. Scarran shock troops, massive, heat-generating warriors bred for combat, meeting Protoss zealots with their Wasai blades and centuries of martial discipline. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be a slaughter. But while the Protoss engaged the main fleet, the Scarran flagship had broken formation. It was moving toward a different target. Toward Moya. They're going after the soft target, Dargo realized. While the Protoss are occupied, they'll capture us and use us as hostages. Or specimens for study, Gila added, her voice hollow with fear. The Scarrans don't take prisoners for ransom. They take them for experimentation. Scorpius's Marauder swooped in, positioning itself between Moya and the approaching flagship, a gesture that was both tactically meaningless and strangely noble. John, I can buy you perhaps 30 micros before they vaporize my ship. I suggest you use them wisely. Pilot, can we? No, Commander. The gravitic interdiction field is still active. We cannot starburst. Crichton's mind raced through options. They couldn't run. They couldn't fight. The Protoss were engaged with the main fleet and couldn't. Zeratol's hand landed on his shoulder. There is another way. The Dark Templar possess abilities the Kalai do not. I can create a shadow walk, a brief passage through the void that will transport Moya beyond the interdiction field's range. You can teleport an entire ship? For a short distance, yes, but it will require anchoring to something familiar. The Dark Templar's green eyes focused on Crichton with uncomfortable intensity. Your mind holds imprints of dimensional travel, wormhole knowledge. If you permit me to link with your consciousness, I can use those patterns to navigate the void. He wants to access the wormhole equations, Aaron said flatly. John, that's what Scorpius has been trying to do for cycles. You can't just let an alien dig around in your brain. I am not Scorpius, Zeratol said quietly. I do not seek to steal knowledge. I seek to borrow understanding, temporarily. Your secrets will remain yours. The Scaran flagship loomed larger on the view screen. Weapons systems were charging. Scorpius's Marauder was already taking fire, his shields flickering under the assault. Crichton looked at his crew. At Gila, terrified but determined. At Jean, radiating trust. At Dargo and Aaron, ready to fight to their last breath despite knowing it was hopeless. At Rigel, who for once wasn't thinking about himself but about all of them. Do it, he said to Zeratol. Get us out of here. The Dark Templar's hand moved to Crichton's forehead. Cold swept through his consciousness as alien awareness merged with human thought. So Zeratol's mind was vastly different from the Kalai, individualistic but profoundly disciplined, carrying the weight of isolation chosen rather than imposed. And then Crichton felt Zeratol touch the wormhole knowledge buried in his neural pathways. The equations that Scorpius coveted, that the ancients had hidden in his brain. Patterns of dimensional manipulation that no human was meant to understand. Zeratol gasped. This is extraordinary. You carry the keys to reality itself within your mind. How do you bear such knowledge without being consumed by it? By being too stupid to understand what I'm carrying, Crichton managed through the psychic link. Can you use it? Yes. Hold steady. The universe inverted. Moya lurched sideways through a direction that didn't exist in conventional space. Crichton's vision filled with shadows that moved with predatory awareness. The void, the Dark Templar called it. The space between spaces where light died, and only those who embraced darkness could navigate. For 3 eternal seconds, they existed nowhere. Then reality snapped back. Moya tumbled out of the shadow walk several 100,000 kilocams from their previous position, far beyond the gravitic interdiction field's range. Alarms blared as pilots struggled to stabilize their spin. Starburst ready, pilot announced. Moya is eager to depart. Do it, now! Moya's starburst engaged, the living ship folding space around herself and vanishing into faster-than-light transit. Behind them, the Scaran flagship's weapons discharge struck empty void. On the view screen's rear display, Crichton watched the battle continue. The Protoss carrier was still engaged, methodically destroying Scaran vessels with terrifying efficiency. Scorpius's Marauder had broken off, retreating to his command carrier, which was now joining the fight with its own weapons. And in the midst of the carnage, Selendis's mental voice reached across the distance one final time. We will finish this engagement, Crichton. When we are done, we shall speak again. The Scarans have validated much of Scorpius's claims. This changes our assessment considerably. Then the psychic contact faded as Moya hurtled through Starburst, putting light years between themselves and the battlefield. In the command chamber, Crichton sagged against a bulkhead while Zeratol withdrew from his mind. The Dark Templar looked shaken. The first time Crichton had seen genuine emotion on a Protoss face. Your burden, Zeratol said quietly, is greater than I imagined. That knowledge, it could reshape galaxies, destroy universes. And you carry it locked away, refusing to use it despite the power it offers. Yeah, well, Crichton's voice was hoarse. With great power comes great potential to screw everything up. I've seen what happens when people play with wormholes. I'm not going down that road. Wisdom, Zeratol acknowledged. More wisdom than many ancient beings possess. He bowed, a gesture of profound respect. You honor the gift you carry by refusing to exploit it. That is rare. Aaron moved to Crichton's side, steadying him. Are you all right? Define all right. He managed a weak smile. I just let an alien warrior monk use my brain as a GPS for shadow teleporting a living ship. I've had worse days. Barely, Dargo muttered. A pilot's voice interrupted the moment. Commander, Moya has completed starburst sequence. We're currently 17 parsecs from the combat zone. Where should we proceed? Crichton looked around the chamber, at the crew who had trusted him through another impossible situation, at Gila, who had escaped one nightmare only to be plunged into another, at the empty space where the Protoss had stood, now returned to their carrier to finish their battle. Somewhere quiet, he said finally. Somewhere we can catch our breath and figure out what the hell just happened. Because I think we just witnessed the start of something a lot bigger than us. The Protoss and Scarens, Jean said softly. Two warrior species meeting for the first time. Neither will forget this encounter. And neither will the peacekeepers, Aaron added. Scorpius now knows the Protoss can fight. That makes them potential allies against the Scarens. He'll pursue that alliance with everything he has. Which means the Protoss are about to learn exactly how persuasive Scorpius can be when he wants something, Crichton said grimly. And we're right in the middle of it all. Rigel floated his throne sled closer. So we've created a three-way power struggle between religious alien warriors, fascist super soldiers, and heat-powered space barbarians. Tell me again how this is better than simply fleeing and never looking back? Because, Crichton said, if we don't stick around to remind everyone that there are actual people caught in the middle of all this political maneuvering, millions are going to die. The Protoss need to see that this universe isn't just about choosing sides. It's about protecting the beings who can't protect themselves. Noble, Dargo said. Possibly suicidal, but noble. Story of our lives, Crichton agreed. Outside Moya's hull, the stars streamed past in starburst transit, carrying them away from one crisis and inevitably toward the next. The Protoss had entered the Farscape universe, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 solar days after the battle, Moya drifted in the remains of an ancient nebula, a graveyard of stars that had died millennia ago, leaving behind clouds of ionized gas that played hell with long-range sensors. It was as close to invisible as a leviathan could get in the uncharted territories. Crichton stood alone in the observation gallery, watching stellar dust paint abstract patterns across the viewport. His mind kept replaying Zeratul's shadow walk, the sensation of reality bending around them, the brief glimpse into the void where darkness lived as a tangible force. He'd carried wormhole knowledge for cycles now, but having someone else access it, use it, proved that the equations in his head could reshape space itself. That was different. That made it real in a way he'd been avoiding. Footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn to know it was Aaron. Pilot says the Protoss carrier just entered the nebula, she reported, moving to stand beside him. They finished with the Scarens, destroyed 8 dreadnoughts, crippled the rest. Scorpius's carrier survived with minimal damage. The Scarens retreated back to their territory. 8 dreadnoughts, Crichton repeated quietly. The Protoss just announced themselves as a major player in this region. The power balance just shifted. It did. Aaron's voice carried the flat pragmatism of someone who understood military realities, which means everyone's going to want them as allies. The peacekeepers, the Scarens, probably half the independent systems too. And the Protoss are going to have to decide what kind of role they want to play. Shepherds of balance, Crichton quoted. That's what they called themselves. Problem is, there's no balance out here. Just competing forms of chaos. The observation gallery's calm chimed. Pilot's voice emerged gentle but urgent. Commander, Executor Selendis is requesting permission to transport a delegation aboard Moya. She wishes to speak with you and the crew. Tell her. Yeah, tell her we'll meet in the command chamber. By the time Crichton and Aaron arrived, the others had already gathered. Dargo stood near the tactical console, his warrior's bearings suggesting he expected this meeting to go badly. Jean floated in meditative repose, though her empathic senses were clearly active and assessing. Rigel hovered near the exit, ready to flee if necessary. and Gila sat near pilot's console, the technician having spent the last 3 days recovering from her trauma with Jean's gentle counseling. The Protoss materialized in their characteristic shimmer of psionic energy. Selendis led, flanked by Karas and Zeratul. But the executor's bearing had changed. The absolute certainty that had radiated from her during their first meetings was still present, but tempered now, complicated by experience. We have completed our initial assessment of the Scaran Imperium. Selendis's mental voice carried formal weight, while we deployed reconnaissance probes to their border territories and observed their interactions with subject populations. We also analyzed the battle data from our engagement. Our conclusions are troubling. Troubling how? Crichton asked. Scorpius was not exaggerating. The Scarans are an expansionist empire built on conquest and subjugation. Their treatment of conquered species is brutal. Forced labor, genetic experimentation without consent, systematic destruction of local cultures. They are, by any reasonable definition, a plague upon this region of space. Karas's mental voice added weight. We observed a colony world they had recently conquered. The indigenous population, a peaceful species with limited technology, had been reduced to servitude within a single cycle. Their cultural artifacts destroyed, their children taken for indoctrination. It was systematic elimination of identity. Like what you did to Zerg-infested worlds, Dargo asked pointedly. Number. Selendis's response was sharp. The Zerg were a consuming plague that transformed victims into monsters. These beings remained themselves. They were simply enslaved. The distinction matters. Jean spoke softly. It does matter. I sense you are troubled, Executor. The easy answer would be to declare the Scarans your enemy and wage war. But you are hesitating. Why? The Protoss exchanged glances. The subtle nerve cord communication that indicated Kala consultation. When Selendis spoke again, her mental voice carried something that might have been vulnerability. Because war with the Scarans would require alliance with the Peacekeepers. And the Peacekeepers, while less overtly brutal, I still maintain order through oppression. We would be choosing which tyranny to support based solely on which presents the lesser immediate threat. This is exactly the moral compromise we entered this universe determined to avoid. Welcome to the uncharted territories, Crichton said quietly, where every choice is between bad and worse. Zeratul moved forward, his green eyes reflecting the nebula's light. During our reconnaissance, I observed something the Kalai may have missed. The Scarans expand through conquest, yes, but they also offer something the Peacekeepers do not, a strange form of meritocracy. Species that prove their worth in combat can rise through Scaran ranks. It is brutal, but it provides opportunity that Peacekeeper genetic breeding denies. You're defending them? Aaron's voice carried disbelief. I'm observing complexity, Zeratul corrected. The Scarans are evil, but they are not uniquely evil. Every power in this region exploits those beneath them. The difference is merely in methodology. Karas bristled. Surely you're not suggesting we ally with the Scarans against the Peacekeepers? I'm suggesting, Zeratul replied calmly, that we ally with neither. That we maintain independence and intervene only when specific atrocities require response. That we resist the temptation to become kingmakers in conflicts we barely understand. Selendis's nerve cords writhed in agitation. And if our inaction allows millions to suffer? If the Scarans continue their expansion unchecked? Then we respond to specific Scaran aggression, Zeratul said. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. But we do not join the Peacekeeper military apparatus simply because they appear to be the lesser evil. The debate hung in the recycled air of Moya's command chamber. Crichton watched the Protoss grapple with the same impossible choices his crew faced every day. How to survive in a morally bankrupt universe without becoming morally bankrupt themselves. Finally, he spoke. Executor, can I tell you what I've learned out here? What we've all learned? Selendis turned her glowing eyes toward him. Speak. There are no permanent allies, no absolute enemies, just beings trying to survive who sometimes help each other and sometimes hurt each other based on circumstances. The Peacekeepers are fascist oppressors, yeah, But they also maintain infrastructure that keeps billions alive. The Scarans are brutal conquerors, but in some ways they're more honest about what they are than the peacekeepers who dress up tyranny and regulations. He moved to the viewport, gesturing at the nebula beyond. And out here, in the spaces between the empires, there are millions of people just trying to live. They're the ones who suffer when the big powers go to war. They're the ones who die when zealots decide to cleanse corruption or impose purity or bring order. What are you suggesting? Karas demanded. I'm suggesting you don't become another empire. You've got the power to crush both peacekeepers and Scarans if you commit your full fleet. But the cost would be millions of civilian casualties, destabilized systems, power vacuums that would be filled by warlords and criminals. You'd save this region by destroying it. Aaron nodded. The Protoss should be a deterrent, not an occupying force. A power that intervenes when one side goes too far. That protects refugee populations. That prevents genocide, but doesn't try to rule. Like the ancient Luxan warrior code, Dargo added. My people believed the strong should protect the weak, but never rule them. Protection without domination. It's a difficult balance, but it's the only one that doesn't eventually corrupt the protector. Jean floated closer to Selendis, her empathic presence radiating gentle understanding. You came here seeking to impose order on chaos, but perhaps the lesson is that chaos isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's simply life. Messy, complicated, morally ambiguous life. And the greatest service isn't to control it, but to ensure it can continue. Selendis was silent for a long moment. Through the Kala link, thousands of Protoss minds were debating, processing, struggling with concepts that challenged their fundamental worldview. When she spoke again, her mental voice carried something new. Not certainty, but considered determination. We will not ally with either the peacekeepers or the Scarans. We will maintain our carrier in this region as an independent force. When we witness specific atrocities, slavery, genocide, torture, we will intervene. But we will not choose sides in your eternal power struggles. We will be guardians without governance, protectors without political alignment. That's going to piss off everyone, Crichton observed. Good. Selendis' response carried grim humor. Perhaps if both empires fear our intervention, they will restrain their worst impulses. And if they do not, we will teach them to. Iskaras bowed to the executor. A wise decision. The Conclave will support this course. As will the Dark Templar, Zeratol added. Independence preserves our integrity better than alliance with either tyranny. Gila, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. What about Scorpius? He's going to try to manipulate you. He'll present carefully selected evidence, frame situations to make the peacekeepers look like defenders rather than oppressors. He's brilliant at manipulation. Then we will resist his manipulation, Selendis stated. We have been warned. We are not naive children to be swayed by honeyed words and convenient truths. We will observe, judge independently, and act according to our conscience rather than political convenience. That's going to be harder than you think, Aaron warned. Scorpius has resources you can't imagine. Intelligence networks, psychological profiles, leverage points. If he decides he wants the Protoss as allies, he'll find ways to make that alliance seem like your idea. Then we shall be vigilant, Karas replied. The Templar have faced manipulative enemies before. We survived the Overmind's psychic assaults. We can withstand one hybrid scheming. Crichton wasn't so sure, but there was no point arguing. The Protoss would learn about Scorpius the hard way, just like everyone else did. Selendis turned to face each crew member in turn, her glowing eyes seeming to assess and acknowledge them individually. You have taught us much, crew of Moya. You showed us that moral certainty can be a trap. That good and evil are often matters of perspective. That survival sometimes requires compromise, but compromise need not mean surrender of principles. She focused on Crichton. And you, human who carries universe-breaking knowledge in his fragile mind, you taught us that power's greatest expression is sometimes restraint. You could reshape reality with the equations you possess. Instead, you guard them. Refuse to exploit them. That is wisdom we shall remember. Just trying to avoid blowing up the universe, Crichton said. It's kind of a low bar. Higher than you think. Selendis's mental voice carried what might have been respect. We will remain in contact. If you discover situations requiring Protoss intervention, you may reach us through the psionic beacon we will leave with your ship. And if you require assistance, you'll come running with glowing swords and righteous fury, Dargo finished. We appreciate it, Executor. Truly. The Protoss began to shimmer, preparing to transport back to their carrier. But Zeratul paused, turning to Crichton one final time. The Void remembers you now, the Dark Templar said quietly. Your mind left an impression. If you ever need to walk in shadow again, call my name into darkness. I will hear. Then they were gone, golden light fading to leave only Moya's crew in the command chamber. Silence reigned for several heartbeats. Finally, Rigel spoke. Did we just successfully navigate first contact with interdimensional warrior aliens without getting killed, enslaved, or judged as too impure to live? Looks like it, Crichton confirmed. Huh. The Dominar actually looked impressed. That might be a first for us. Aaron moved to the sensor console, checking the Protoss carrier's status. They're holding position at the nebula's edge, establishing what looks like a permanent observation post. Good, Crichton said. Maybe having them around will make the Peacekeepers and Scarans think twice before doing their worst. Or it will start a three-way war that consumes the entire region, Dargo countered. Always the optimist. Jean placed a gentle hand on Gila's shoulder. What will you do now, child? You cannot return to Peacekeeper space. Scorpius has marked you as a traitor. The technician looked up, her eyes clearer than they'd been in days. I want to help. The data I released, it's spreading through independent networks. People are learning what Scorpius does in his laboratories. I want to make sure the truth keeps spreading. Maybe join a refugee organization. I use my technical skills to help people instead of hurting them. We can arrange that, Aaron said. There are resistance cells operating throughout the uncharted territories, medical stations, refugee transports. They always need skilled technicians. Thank you. Gila's voice was small but determined. All of you. You saved my life when you had no reason to. You fought for me when it would have been easier to let me die. That's what we do, Crichton said simply. We're not heroes. We're not saints. But we try to help when we can. It's not much, but it's something. Pilot's voice emerged through the comm. Commander, if there are no immediate threats, Moya would like to depart this nebula. She finds the stellar remnants melancholy. They remind her of leviathans who have passed beyond. Yeah, Art, let's get out of here. Crichton moved to the central console, already plotting courses to nowhere in particular. Pilot, take us somewhere peaceful. Somewhere we can rest for a few days before the universe decides to throw something else at us. With pleasure, Commander. As Moya's organic engines engaged, pushing them out of the nebula and into open space, Crichton allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd survived. They'd helped the Protoss find a better path than Crusader conquest. They'd saved Gila. They'd even managed to avoid getting killed by Scorpius or the Scarans. For the uncharted territories, that qualified as a massive victory. Aaron moved to his side, her presence warm and solid. You know Scorpius isn't going to leave this alone, right? Why, he's going to spend every waking moment figuring out how to exploit the Protoss for his war against the Scarans. Yeah, I know. And the Scarans are going to study the battle data, find weaknesses in Protoss tactics, come back better prepared. Yep. And the Protoss, for all their good intentions, are still zealots with superweapons who might decide at any moment that this entire region needs cleansing. All true. Crichton looked at her, managed a tired smile. But today, right now, we won. We helped them choose restraint over conquest. That's worth something. It is, Aaron agreed. She leaned against him, and for a moment they just watched the stars stream past Moya's viewports. Think they'll actually stick to their principles? Stay independent? Maybe, maybe not. But we gave them the choice. What they do with it is on them. Dargo joined them at the viewport, his massive frame relaxed for the first time in days. The Protosses remind me of my father. So certain of their righteousness. So convinced their cause justifies any action. I hope they prove wiser than he was. They've got a chance, Crichton said. They listened. They changed their minds when presented with evidence. That's more than a lot of zealots manage. Jean drifted over, completing their small circle. I believe the Protoss will find their way. They carry tremendous guilt beneath their certainty. I felt it through the Kala connection. They know they've made terrible choices. Perhaps that knowledge will guide them toward better ones. Rigel humphed from his throne sled. Or perhaps they'll decide guilt is inconvenient and resume purging everything that offends their delicate sensibilities. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. Everything in the uncharted territories eventually becomes our problem, Crichton observed. That's kind of our thing. Unfortunately true, the Dominar admitted. They stood together in comfortable silence as Moya carried them through the void. Behind them, visible through the aft viewports, the golden Protoss carrier hung against the stars. A promise and a threat, a symbol of hope and potential catastrophe. The Protoss had entered the Farscape universe as conquerors seeking to impose purity. They remained as guardians struggling to understand complexity. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in the uncharted territories, where survival meant compromise and heroism meant simply refusing to become a monster, progress was all anyone could hope for. Crichton smiled, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Scorpius was plotting. The Scarans were preparing revenge. 1,000 petty warlords and criminal organizations were adjusting their strategies to account for the new power in the region. But right now, aboard a living ship crewed by fugitives and dreamers, there was peace. It wouldn't last. It never did. But for this moment, it was enough. The Golden Carrier remained at the nebula's edge for 3 more solar days before departing for deeper space, establishing patrol routes that would take it through the most contested regions of the uncharted territories. True to Selendis' word, the Protoss intervened in specific atrocities, a Scaran slave raid, and a peacekeeper. Pacification that was really genocide, a corporate extraction operation that had devolved into mass murder. Each intervention was surgical, overwhelming, and impartial. The Protoss didn't choose sides based on politics. They protected the helpless and punished the cruel, regardless of which empire those perpetrators served. The effect rippled through the region. Peacekeeper commanders began exercising more restraint, knowing that excessive brutality might summon golden warriors from the void. Scaran raiders learned that certain targets, refugee convoys, medical stations, civilian colonies, were now protected by forces they couldn't match. Criminal organizations discovered that slavery and torture attracted attention they couldn't survive. It wasn't peace, it wasn't order. But it was a new balance, enforced not by empire but by principle. Scorpius, of course, continued his schemes. But even his brilliance found limited purchase against warriors who had been manipulating galactic politics for millennia. The Protoss listened to his arguments, considered his evidence, and made their own decisions. Sometimes those decisions aligned with peacekeeper interests. Sometimes they didn't. And aboard Moya, Crichton and his crew continued their eternal flight through the uncharted territories, helping where they could, surviving where they must, and occasionally looking up at the stars to see golden ships passing like distant suns. The Protoss had found their purpose in the Farscape universe, not as conquerors or crusaders, but as the conscience the region never knew it needed. Flawed, sometimes self-righteous, but genuinely trying to protect rather than rule. In a universe of competing tyrannies and moral compromise, that was a light worth preserving, even if it burned with the intensity of righteousness that could, if mishandled, consume everything it touched. But that was a problem for another day.